So good afternoon. Please may I welcome you and members of the public and press who've joined us today. The County Council allows filming and photography at its public meetings, so feel free to take pictures or share on social media during the meeting. Please, though, can everyone present turn their phones to silent or vibrate while the meeting is taking place. There is no fire alarm test scheduled for today, so if the alarm sounds, I will adjourn the meeting and we will leave the room by the side doors and use the external fire exit to the assembly point in the car park. I would remind everyone present that this meeting will be live streamed and a recording will be placed on the council's website. The meeting will be adjourned every 2 hours for a short comfort break. Thank you. So may I have apologies for absence?
Apologies received from Councillor Liam Beckett, substituted by Councillor Louis Navarro, Councillor Charlotte Lowe, John Young and Kate Pereira.
Thank you very much. Are there any, does any member wish to declare any disclosable pecuniary interest or non-statutory disclosable interest? Councillor Damery-Holman.
Just for completeness sake, with regards to item 8, it's non-pecuniary, but I am the local member for one of the primary schools, the Icknield Primary School, which is having money ported to it. I assume there's no conflict of interest, but if there is, I will happily take advice on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other? Councillor Sidlow.
Same for me.
Thank you. I think we probably all have schools in our divisions that are being considered as there's a lot of information about all schools today. So thank you. But those are noted. Next item, we're being asked to approve the minutes of the meeting on the 7th of October 2025 as an accurate record. Does everyone agree they're an accurate record? I'm seeing no dissent, so I'll take that as approved. Thank you very much. An updated minutes action log was included in the published papers. Are there any questions on the action log? Okay. Thank you very much. We will take the minutes action log as noted. Next item is public questions and petitions. We have received one public question which relates to the next item on the agenda. With your consent, we will take that item at the start of the next item, which is Schools and Early Years Revenue Funding Arrangements 26 to 27. We have received a public question in relation to this item from Ms. Liz Day, a local resident. Is Ms. Day here? She is not, I believe. In which case, Tamar, would you read out the question, please?
Cambridgeshire currently faces a £98 million SEND deficit. Complaints to the council and the local government and social care ombudsman have increased by around 500%, and SEND tribunals are overwhelmingly upheld in favour of parents. Transfers from the dedicated schools grant to the high needs block have taken place for many years, yet there is little published evidence showing whether this spending is improving outcomes for children and young people or their lived experience in education. My question is, in the context of agenda item 4, can the committee commit to publishing clear, measurable outcomes linked to high need spending so that schools, parents and community partners can see whether public funds are producing meaningful improvements in children's education and lived experience?
Thank you very much. That's a really important question, and Ms. Day will have a written response within 10 working days of this meeting, so we can give a proper and full response to it. Thank you.
Chair, may I ask that response is shared with members as well, please?
Yes, indeed. So now we have the report to consider substantive report, and it will be introduced by Sarah Callahan, Service Director for Education, and Martin Wade, Strategic Finance Manager. If you'd like to come up to the table, please.
Thank you. So a bit of a longer introduction than I'd normally do for an item like this, but I think just given the context and the complexity of this, I think it's worth spending a little time just for a number of members who this is the first time they've been through the school's budget setting process. Just before we start, however, just like to say that we're actually revising recommendation A to this report. So in the current report, it quotes that we want to approve a 0.5% block transfer from the schools block to the high needs block. We're revising that recommendation to approving a 0% block transfer from the schools block to the high needs block. And as I'll go through my introduction, I'll explain the rationale for that change in terms of the process. Okay, so a little bit of background. The approval of the school's local funding formula, which applies to all primary and secondary schools, whether they're maintained by the local authority or whether they are academies, part of a multi-academy trust, remains the responsibility of the local authority on an annual basis following consultation with Schools Forum. Due to the strict criteria that applied as part of the national funding formula, there is now limited local discretion within the distribution of this funding and the allowable factors which can be applied to all schools, and they're set out in Appendix A that accompanied this report in terms of those allowable factors. It's also important to note that any values and budgets in both Appendix A and Appendix B of this report remain draft and are subject to change until this local formula has been approved by the Department for Education. So following submission of the local formula, which we need to do by this Thursday, the DFE will undertake a series of detailed checks to ensure that the approach is compliant with the national funding formula. We also have one outstanding query with the DFE in respect of an historic issue we are trying to resolve, which impacts on one school. If approved, this will result in a slight increase in funding, which will apply to all schools. And I can talk a little bit more in detail about that later. So, as in previous years, the timing of the publication of the dedicated schools grant and the accompanying guidance in mid-December results in a very tight timescale for the initial financial modelling, the consultation, and then obviously seeking political approval. I think the report sets out the main issues that the 26-27 budget setting process, but just a few I would like to highlight in terms of the kind of the key areas of impact. So, as part of the continued move towards the national funding formula, on an annual basis, local authorities are required to move their local formula at least 10% closer to the national funding formula. This isn't an issue for Cambridgeshire, as we have previously aligned with the national funding formula, but it's worth being aware of. The overall uplift in the schools block funding received at a per pupil level is around 2.3%. However, due to a significant reduction in overall pupil numbers between October 24 and October 25 census points, the overall schools block cash increase between those years is only 1.3%, and that's shown in the table within the main report. Following consultation with Schools Forum at their November and December meeting, the figures in Appendix A and Appendix B provide draft figures based on the agreed principles for the two separate scenarios, 0% and 0.5% block transfer. A number of grants schools have received separately in the current financial year have now been baselined into the main funding allocations at a national level. This will have variable impact on schools dependent on their current grant allocations. Also linked to the pupil numbers, the significant reduction in pupil numbers, most notably in the primary sector, results in some schools seeing a material reduction in funding between the two financial years. And again, that detail can be seen in Appendix B, which accompanies the reports. So just a little bit more detail around the high needs block and the high needs block transfer now. So although the table at 3.5 shows a circa 5.3% increase in the high needs block to be received, once additional baseline grants, which weren't available at the time the initial figures have been included, this actually results in a 0% uplift in the high needs block funding between the two financial years. This is because the DfE have temporarily suspended the High Needs National Funding Formula, and as such, all initial allocations are based on 25-26 allocations only. We therefore await further updates, which we hope will be published alongside the much anticipated SEND white paper early this year. In previous years, to support the increasing pressures on special educational needs and disability budgets, we've asked Schools Forum to approve a block transfer, which effectively moves funding from schools to the high needs block. Forum are able to approve a block transfer of up to 0.5%, whereas anything above this, or if Forum do not approve, requires Department for Education or Secretary of State approval via what is known as a disapplication process. At the meeting of Cambridgeshire Schools Forum on Friday last week, members of Forum voted unanimously against a block transfer of 0.5% due to the increasing financial challenges across all schools and multi-academy trusts. A number of Forum members commented on the issue at length and highlighted that this is a national issue, and without certainty on the SEND white paper and the high need levels of funding for 26-27, it is not possible to make an informed decision at this time. There was also recognition that the work between the local authority and Schools Forum via the high needs subgroup is making progress on a number of key issues in terms of the behavioural and inclusion partnerships, enhanced resource bases and special schools fundings, but ultimately there is not enough funding in the system to meet current need. As can be seen from the initial draft budget scenarios in Appendix B, 0.5% or a £2.7 million block transfer would result in significant reduction in funding for a number of schools, some of which are already in or heading towards a deficit position. Therefore, as noted at the start of my presentation, officers are of the view that any transfer would have a negative impact on individual schools and would further impact on their ability to set balanced budgets and support pupils with high needs already on their roll. Based on this and following the further discussions with Schools Forum on Friday, as I've mentioned, the proposed revised recommendation is for a 0% block transfer and approves scenario 1, the 0% as per the appendices. It is, however, important to note we are still committed to creating additional enhanced resource bases, ERB places, in maintained schools and developing outreach support to avoid the escalation to higher cost external provision. But the suspension of the high needs national funding formula and resulting lack of clarity around the high needs funding levels for 26-27 has hampered the decision-making process. Finally, in respect of early years funding continues to be national investment in the sector, and the proposed hourly rates in section 5.3 reflect the maximum rates which have been calculated as affordable based on projections of uptake. Both the approach and proposed rates have been endorsed by the Early Years Provider Reference Group at their meeting on the 7th of January. So I say apologies for a slightly longer introduction than usual, but I thought it was important to just set out the context and some of the discussions that have taken place. So happy to take any comments or questions.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And before I move on to questions, may I just acknowledge Ms. Day? Your question was asked in your absence, and we promise that a full response will be with you within 10 days. Thank you for attending. Right, may I have any questions or comments? Councillor Martin.
Thank you very much, Chair. I've got some other questions, but I want to just touch on something that has been said at the start. It's disappointing that we're only learning whilst we're in the meeting that one of the recommendations has been changed. Unless it was changed, the decision to change was made today, literally 30 minutes ago, we could have had an email sent around to all of us to notify us. I've been reading this report, including the recommendation for that change. We could have been notified beforehand. But I just want to clarify why the change has been made, because you gave two reasons in your initial report. One of them being that it's been frozen by the high needs block formula has been frozen by DfE. But a second one was the Schools Forum that met on Friday. So which of the two is it? And when were we told about the DfE freezing the high needs funding formula?
Yeah, thank you. We met, as you've said, we met as Schools Forum on Friday, and for all committee reports, they have to be published in advance. So we'd already presented the reports, and it's important, obviously, that we consult with schools in terms of that disapplication. And when we had the debate at Schools Forum, although, as Martin said, there was support in terms of the direction of travel for improvement within SEND. However, because of the financial constraints that schools are experiencing themselves, they didn't at that point feel that they could support the disapplication. So it was the timing of when we'd had the scheduled dates for Schools Forum and committee.
I completely appreciate that there's a timescale for when these reports can go out, but it doesn't stop an adjustment being made in between the report being released and us sitting here today. We could have had an email yesterday to say, just to inform members, we propose to bring forward a different recommendation to what's in front of us. We as a committee could have then read the papers in a different way to what we had done, because I was reading it in the context of a 0.5% block transfer. Most of my questions were in relation to that. All of that time was wasted, and we could have been scrutinising a different part of the report that is equally important, but maybe not as important as that discussion or that first recommendation. Thank you, Chair.
I do take your point, and I think it's well made. I think the other thing that I didn't mention is that we could still apply to the Secretary of State to support that 0.5% disapplication. So there had to be some internal discussion regarding what course of action we were going to take. So that did prolong, obviously with having the meeting on Friday. So, but the point is well made, and we'll take that on board. Thank you.
Councillor Goodliffe. Oh, sorry, Councillor Edge.
Thank you. I think given the decision made at Schools Forum on Friday, which was unanimous, I think kind of support of their position is really important. We're all more than aware of the pressures on schools, as there have been for several years, with many being at tipping point on balancing their budgets and managing deficit themselves. Just for the committee's clarity, can you, given the change in what was in the paper and where we're at now, can you just give some clarity on the implications of supporting the 0% in terms of budget and high needs block? Just for clarity, so people can understand what may or may not have changed there.
Yeah, of course. So obviously what that means in terms of this off the top of the schools budgets, obviously a 0% transfer means that all schools will obviously receive a slightly higher allocation because that 2.7 million won't be transferred. In terms of the high needs block itself, it doesn't fundamentally change anything we plan to do in terms of the work and development with schools and the kind of the enhanced resource bases, special school funding, etc., etc. I think the real issue is in terms of still the lack of clarity about what the actual high needs block allocation from government is going to be following the freezing of the suspension of the current high needs block allocations. So until we kind of get that SEND white paper, which will hopefully come with some accompanying funding to support the kind of the changes and the proposals that are going forward, I think the kind of the overall impact is still a little bit of an unknown because of the kind of the lack of clarity around that. I don't know, Sarah, if you want to add anything more to that.
No, I think I'd just add really that the work to improve has to continue, and one of the issues that's adding to that pressure that Martin's highlighted within the high needs block is the large number of children that are attending high cost independent provision, which is absolutely right for some of those children, but obviously our aspiration is that we have more children attending their local mainstream school, accessing specialist support when they can. And part of the disapplication last year was to support the rollout of the enhanced resource provision, and we now have a further 4 units to come on track by September 2026, which will provide places for children with autistic spectrum disorder who will be able to stay within their mainstream schools but access support when they need it. So that will continue to progress, but obviously we were making the request that we could support the disapplication because there will be some twin tracking between growing additional provision in county whilst also waiting for those children in independent provision to age out, because we obviously can't take those children out of independent provision once they're there. So so we will continue to progress the activity to support more children to remain at local schools, and we made the decision. I mean, we respect the decision that Schools Forum arrived at given their financial situation, which is why we didn't then progress to the Secretary of State for Education to continue with this application. And sorry, that added to you know, your point that you made earlier, but obviously we had the meeting on Friday and we had the internal discussions yesterday. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Goodliff.
Thank you. As people have said, it's very confusing having changed and having spent a lot of time with the papers and working through. The questions I have left are about the financial issues which are caused by falling roles, particularly around deficit budget settings, and issues particularly we can see in the tables for small schools, primarily primary and infant junior small schools. Can you tell us what work is being done by the council to assist these schools, and what advanced planning are we doing with our academy secondary schools? Because obviously these numbers will eventually follow through to that point, and if we don't get ahead of the numbers issue that they will be having once, you know, the falling roles we've seen for the last 2-3 years progress through to that level, we're going to see huge this rolling on for a good 10 years. Thanks.
Yeah, so just as off with, yeah, you're completely right, Councillor. If there is a real concern around the kind of the changes, and obviously the impact of the for individual schools in the primary sector at the moment is quite considerable, and this was touched upon at several of the last Schools Forum meetings. We're currently developing a small school strategy, and that will be going to Martin's leadership team in the next week or so, and then we'll be able to share that more widely as we develop the kind of the approach that we're going to be taking around that, working with academies and maintain schools in areas to look at what those strategic long-term solutions are going to be. One of the points also raised at Schools Forum previous meeting was the need for that kind of that look across all schools, all age groups, whether they're academy or maintained, to look at that kind of longer term strategic planning about places. So again, that will be something that will be coming back to probably this group and Schools Forum as part of a wider conversation and discussion around that.
Councillor Goldsack.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I beg your pardon, Councillor Goodliff. Do ask another question.
Thank you, and thank you for that answer. Chair, through you, if I may, we've been talking about a small school strategy for at least 2 years now. Could we please have a date for that to come to committee so that we can actually see when that comes through, so that we can see that strategy in process? Because this, as I say, has been discussed before.
Yes, I absolutely hear you and agree, and I'm sure we'll be able to secure a date as soon as possible and let the committee know. Yeah. Was that the matter you wanted to come back on? Thank you very much, Councillor Goodliff. Councillor Goldsack.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, officers, for what's there. I'm going to break this down into real simplistic terms, because unfortunately that's about the level that I work at. When I read the paper, I saw a financial sum equivalent to 0.5% of the block transfer going across into high needs block. The fact that that's not going across, is that a cut? Is that a reduction? Does that mean the high needs block is now down that money? I don't kind of understand the consequences of it and what the knock-on effects are. So if I could have a very simplistic explanation for that. I'm sorry if that's in the paper, but I just find the paper is very comprehensive, but almost very complex, and then you need that information knowledge that I probably haven't got at this moment. So if I can have a very simplistic answer on that, is the high needs block 0.5% less funded than it would have been?
Thank you. That's a very fair question. It just needs a bit of explanation.
It
Thank you.
does, I'd agree. And yeah, and again, I can only apologise for the complexity of the paper. And I think, as I've said many times, if you were to develop a funding system for schools, this would not be what you would come up with, and it has become overly complicated over the years. Effectively, no, it's not a cut to the high needs block, because that money is not guaranteed on a year-on-year basis. So it is not a guaranteed amount of funding that will go into the high needs block. It has to be approved on an annual basis. In terms of that, the maximum that Schools Forum can approve, as I said, is 0.5%, but we never build that into our initial assumptions, because, as I say, it is not approved on an annual basis. I think the bigger concern is, as I said, is the lack of clarity around actually the amount of funding we're going to receive from government in terms of the initial high needs block funding, because effectively, if that doesn't increase from the current levels that it's at, effectively that does translate into a real terms cut compared to the current financial year. So I'm sorry, there's probably not as much clarity in that answer as you like, but as I say, I think we're in that situation at the moment where we haven't got that clarity from the DFE about the funding levels, so it's difficult to say provide that to yourselves.
Okay, no, that's a very good attempt at condensing a very difficult subject. Was 0.5% agreed last year?
Yes, 0.5% was agreed last year.
So the high needs block is down 0.5% based on last year's situation.
Compared to last year, based on that, yes, it is.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Councillor Navarro. I do beg your pardon, Councillor Martin. Sorry.
Sorry. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Rose. Appendix B shows a significant numbers of schools experiencing real terms and cash terms reductions due to failing roles and grant baselining. Thank you to Councillor Goodley for mentioning that in her point. Now, I want to be a little more explicit on to what I think I would like to see in this report, which is how many schools are crossing from surplus to deficits, how many are breaching the license deficit thresholds, how many are entering a structural deficit. And I believe that you have access to the CFR returns, to the license deficit registers, and to schools that can concern in the pipeline. But I don't see any of that in the report. And I think that is crucial information. Do you know how many of those schools are moving into deficit and as a direct result of these changes? And what is the council's formal threshold for intervention before a school becomes financially non-viable?
So yeah, so in terms of the kind of the deficit position of schools, we bring kind of an annual update in terms of the financial position of our maintained schools. Obviously, we don't have that information for academies. We only have that information for those schools that come under the purview of the local authority. Until the schools have done their detailed budget setting for 26-27, we don't know how many schools will be moving into deficit position. That work will be undertaken in the kind of the next 2 or 3 months once these budgets are published. We do know, however, that we have obviously got around 35 schools currently in deficit, 35 of our maintained schools in deficit, and that was information that was shared with this committee previously. We have a number of intervention levels with those as part of our deficit intervention policy. We have finance improvement groups and finance support groups and regular meetings with those schools to kind of look at their financial position and work with them to come up with structural and non-structural solutions. And that's across a number of areas across the local authority, work together to support those schools in terms of that. As I said, what we will do, obviously, as we kind of move through the budget setting process, we will be in a position to kind of bring back that more updated information to this committee. And one of the things that I have committed to do previously is start including more regular updates as part of the finance monitoring reports when they come in terms of the school finance position in terms of that. And that's certainly something we will endeavour to do as we move into the new financial year.
Thank you, Councillor Martin.
Thank you very much, Chair. So in the report, it mentions even after the transfer that the allocation is significantly below current and forecast levels of spend.
Yeah.
Now, as all of us in this room know, the safety valve agreement is crucial and critical. Does the proposed budget meet the DFE conditions for deficit reduction, or are we risking breaching the agreements in the budget that's in front of us today?
So in terms of the safety valve agreement itself, that is currently, it has been suspended and has been suspended for a long period of time now. We're still waiting to hear what the next part of the process is going to be in terms of the future of safety valve. I don't believe, and Martin and Sarah might be able to correct me wrong, I don't believe there's been any official announcements about what's happening in terms of the future arrangements in terms of that. So at the moment, there are no conditions for us to breach really, because as I say, that original safety valve agreement was suspended about 18 months ago.
Thank you. Councillor Stewart.
Good afternoon. You mentioned you don't have the data regarding academies. Could you just clarify what that means?
Yeah, so academy schools obviously are their own entity, a part of Multi-Academy Trust. They submit their accounts and directly and submit their returns directly to Department for Education rather than to the local authority. We have in the past kind of collected the information by looking at their published accounts. It's actually quite hard to unpick sometimes because they're sometimes not reported as individual schools, but more as part of the overall Multi-Academy Trust. Again, we have done some work with Schools Forum in the past to try and collect the information with various levels of success in collecting it. So the information is out there, but again, because they work on an academic year rather than a financial year, it's not as easy to collate and compare like with like, and there's no requirement for them to return that information to the local authority. As I say, they have to return it to the DFE directly rather than to ourselves.
Apologies. Just for clarification, so does that mean that schools within academies essentially don't really need to divulge the way in which they're spending taxpayers' money?
No, no, that information is submitted to the Department for Education. It is then published in terms of the overall kind of school level information on the DFE website. It's just not returned directly to the local authority. So it is published, but at a more national level by the DFE rather than being via the local authority as it would be for maintained schools.
Councillor Sidlow.
Thank you. Can I just ask who sets? So it's very frustrating that this that this changed. I know people have already said that, but it could have been predicted that the Schools Forum may vote in a different way to how the officers were choosing to put forward the options. Who sets the frequency of School Forum meetings? Who decides when they meet to decide these things?
So the meetings, there's a set requirement for a number of meetings per year as per national guidance. The meetings are set up to reflect when we expect to get the DFE announcement. So unfortunately, as I said at the start, because the announcements were not made until very late, we had a meeting in December, and then to try and schedule it in so we can get a Schools Forum meeting ahead of Children and Young People's Committee, these were the only dates available. In fact, we actually had to move this committee back a week because otherwise it would have been ahead of Schools Forum. This is an annual problem we have, and it's kind of a little bit out of our control. And unfortunately, the announcements from the DFE seem to get later and later each year, and kind of compress that timescale in terms of that. So we can control when the dates are set, but actually our options are very limited because of when the information becomes available and the schedule of getting meetings in the diary.
Okay, understood. This must be a problem for all councils, is it? And do we make DFE aware every time this causes a problem, and it still doesn't change anything?
Yes, we do make them aware about the timescales and the lateness of the announcements and the implications that has in terms of that. For some other councils, it's not so much of an issue where they have a cabinet system and can have delegated responsibility to their cabinet members. Obviously, for transparency, we obviously want to bring all of these things through the committee system, and obviously that does add a slightly more time pressure to the process. But yeah, it is a problem for all local authorities, and it's something we do raise regularly with the DFE.
Thank you. With regards to the 1.5%, can you tell me what that is in real terms? How much in actual money was that last year, or what were we expecting to transfer this year? Because all very well having a percentage, but
Yeah, so 0.5%. So the 0.5% equated to £2.7 million.
so that's a lot of money to lose out of the special needs budget. How when schools are already struggling with having to fund I understand why the schools voted to keep the money, because they're having to actually fund TAs while they're waiting on the HCPs, etc. So they're really struggling, and as you said, there's lots of deficits. We really need to look at some plans to get that money back, because that that money was spent last year. Even if you haven't factored it in, it will be factored in the provision that we're already providing, won't it?
I just think it's worth making the point that there is a national SEND crisis, and so 33 local authorities across the country are in safety valve agreements with the DFE. So those issues which you rightly are raising that are putting pressure both on local authorities and schools, they're not unique to Cambridgeshire. And so I think the ask really, and the chair of Schools Forum did start the meeting on Friday, making the point that as one of the lowest funded local authorities as part of the F40, which is the 40 lowest funded local authorities nationally, that we are disadvantaged in Cambridgeshire in particular, because I think the information that Martin shared also does show that the per pupil funding for Cambridgeshire is significantly lower than number of other local authorities. So our schools, although they're supportive of the improvements that we're making, obviously for them they're also experiencing significant financial pressure. And so it's really, I mean, I think the quote was used at Schools Forum that it is kind of pushing peas around a plate. We're all in this together. We're all trying to make significant improvements to improve the lived experience of children with special educational needs. But we're kind of looking at deficits sitting with schools, or looking at deficits sitting with the local authority, because the bottom line is there isn't sufficient funding. So obviously we're making headway in terms of enabling more children to remain in the enhanced resource provision that I referred to earlier, but it's just helpful to see it within that national context.
Thank you very much. Councillor Goldsack.
If I can come back, I've just done a little bit of research. I wonder if you can help me with some information here. So I've just had a look at who's on the Schools Forum, therefore is making this meeting. Now I see that we've got 3 members who are non-voting members. So one of them is sorry, 3 of them are elected members from the council. And there's a list of names. I don't recognise them. Are these educational based people? I mean, where are they drawn from?
Yeah, so the kind of membership of Schools Forum is set out by the DFE. It has to be proportionate based on the number of schools in the different phases and whether there are academy or maintained representatives. So we have a number of head teachers, we have a number of CEOs from multi-academy trusts. So all of these people are representing the schools and the sectors to which they are voted members to represent. So yes, they are all from the kind of the education and school sectors.
Okay. Are there members or a member on there from the high needs block?
We have a subgroup for the high needs block, and the chair of that subgroup is on Schools Forum, but the members are defined by a constitution that is defined by the Department of
So,
Education.
Understanding the process, Sarah, that then effectively, I hate to be very literal about this, but turkeys and Christmas coming to mind here. So the decision here on whether the funding goes to the high needs block or stays within the schools is made by people that are running the schools.
But you've got to think about it that in terms of the high needs block, they would also benefit from that money going to the high needs block. So this is where, as I say, it's that kind of wider context. There are members on Schools Forum who are from special schools as well, so are directly funded from the high needs block in terms of that. So there's not really a kind of a representative, if you like, for the high needs block, as it were, but there are a number of services, alternative provision, the special school representatives who are directly funded from that funding source.
And just to avoid any doubt, this is a government dictated process that we're part of a tiny cog in a very, very big setup here. So other than, as the member colleague to the right here said, letting them know that we're not happy, which I know you do on a weekly basis, there's nothing we can do about this. This is a fait accompli, basically. Wow. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. If I may, we've had a really full debate about this very serious decision that we have to make. We have if I may put the recommendations to the vote now. We have, sorry. Ask for questions and comments. If you would, all right, if you want to move to a debate, please do.
Thank you very much, Chair. Yeah, so we've gone from questions now into debate. Personally, I don't see how I can support what's in front of us today because we don't have all the information in front of us. We have been told, the paper in front of us includes a 0.5% block transfer. We're now being told that isn't the case. We haven't got those numbers in front of us. What is the impact of that on our schools? We haven't got an impact assessment in front of us based on what is here. So,
sorry, can I just come in there? You have in Appendix B, it quite clearly shows the difference between a 0% and a 0.5% block transfer for every school in the county. So that information has been included in Appendix B. They were the two scenarios that we agreed with Schools Forum we would model, the 0% transfer and the 0.5% transfer. So that breakdown at a school level has been included in the appendices.
Okay, thank you very much for that. It is in there, but trying to work out what the impact is on our schools, because that's £2.7 million being taken away compared to what we had last time round, as Councillor Goldsack managed to get out of us. I don't see how I can support this without having the additional information and being able to look at this more thoroughly, considering changes have been made at the 11th hour in the meeting.
Councillor Edge.
Sorry, can I just come back and clarify what the officers have already said? I think if we're looking at this in the round, this is year on year, it's always a difficult kind of decision to make because of the timing of Schools Forum. What the officers have presented in the paper up front is data that looks at the 0% and looks at the 0.5%. All of that is in the paper to see what the contrast is between the two. So personally, in my view, we have the information that we need to understand the impact of a 0% transfer to the high needs block. I think that the bigger issue here, which I think is what the Schools Forum have made themselves, is that they're up against it with their deficits. It is, peas around the plate, a little bit like Sarah Callaghan said, and we have to kind of consider the impact on our schools as well. They do have costs to cover when it comes to covering SEND within a lot of their own schools. This is about how the high needs block, so those with EHCPs, are managed. So personally, in my view, I think we really need to support the Schools Forum with this. understanding the impact on them and their budgets by essentially taking that money out of what otherwise would have been their budget.
Thank you. Councillor Goodliff.
Thank you. I guess the question for debate today isn't that school budgets are pressed. We know that. It also isn't that the SEND system is broken, and we know that that's being looked at very fully by the government at the moment. I think the question is, what's the impact for us here, in that the needs haven't gone away, the requirement for us to deliver for those children hasn't gone away, and we now have 2.7 million less. Where in the budget is that money going to come from? And I think that's more of a debate for later on today, and obviously at budget meetings later on next month.
Councillor Edge.
Sorry, can I just hopefully make a correct clarification? Forgive me if I'm wrong. Because we're talking about the high needs block, we're talking about what goes into the safety valve, not what goes into the budget. So that 2.7 that would be needed to be spent on children within the high needs block would go into the safety valve budget, which is outside of the main SEF budget.
Yeah, that's correct. So the dedicated schools grant is separate to the core funding of the local authority. So what we're talking about here is DSG. There's still, as Councillor Goodliff said, it still does create a further pressure potentially on the DSG in terms of that spend, because that demand isn't going away. But as we said earlier, we still don't actually know what the final high needs block allocation for 26-27 is going to be. So I think that's obviously something we'd need to come back to.
Thank you. Councillor Damry-Holman.
Thank you very much, Chair, and good afternoon, everyone. So as we're in the debate now, for me, the big question is our recommendations in front of us. Just starting on recommendation C, I mean, I don't think I've heard anyone suggest that we have any qualms with the early years funding. I'm pleased to see that this is in line with the provider reference group recommendations. And I think, so recommendation A, we've discussed a lot. For me, this isn't something that I'm particularly considering. I mean, I had a little bit of foresight that this was going to Schools Forum, kept in the loop with that. And I think I personally would find it very difficult to go against their view, particularly Councillor Edge's clarification there on how it links to the safety valve certainly gives me more confidence in that. Nonetheless, we're not here making a decision on that as far as I'm aware, because that recommendation has been rescinded. So for me, it's then recommendation B. Now, we have discussed a lot the national challenges to education. I don't propose that we go over those again. I think my big question is, if I were to not support this, what would the alternative be? How would this formula look? And to be honest, I'm not sure. First and foremost, I'm not sure I've got the expertise to make a really detailed assessment of this, but from what I have read, from what I have heard from our officer colleagues, is this process is very centrally driven. Statutory instruments are key to how we go about this, and I personally don't see that there is much room for change, and I am yet to hear any suggestion from this committee of how we would alter the formula factors and draft unit values. So I'm quite happy to support recommendations B and C, as will be asked to.
Thank you very much. Councillor Goldsack.
May I make a recommendation, Chair, please, that we vote on A, B and C separately? Because as things stand at the moment, I think there are people in the room maybe that cannot support all three aspects, but may be able to support two of them. And I think that's what you've just highlighted. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there general consensus about that? Is that what you were going to say, Councillor Tong?
Oh, I was going to, yes, say I support that, but also offer a comment. Shall I offer it now, or shall I pass it back to you?
Please offer it now.
Yes. So firstly, I would like to thank officers for their work on this report. I am a new member to both the council and the committee, and it was acknowledged at the start that, well, this process can be quite complex and does require a lot of time to think about it and mull it over. I really agree with Councillor Edge's comment, which is that the information is there, but unfortunately, with the curveball of recommendation A being swapped so late, I don't think it has given me appropriate time to confidently make that decision. I think the information is there to make it, but I would have liked, frankly, even a few hours of notice would have given me some more time to think about that, more time to mull it over. So personally, I'd feel a lot more comfortable breaking that apart and then abstaining on recommendation A. I do trust what officers are saying. However, for me to vote through something, I want it to be something I'm very sure about, especially on such an important subject as this.
Thank you. That's understood. Councillor Damry-Holman.
Chair, could I just get some clarity on my understanding at the start was that officers are withdrawing recommendation A, so I wasn't expecting to vote on it. If we are to vote on it, I would probably have some thoughts or debate on that, but I'd welcome some clarity on whether we are expected to vote on recommendation A or if that's been officially withdrawn.
So the proposal was to change recommendation A to ask you to approve a 0% block transfer rather than a 0.5% block transfer, which was the original proposal.
Thank you, Martin. And then, Chair, may I just offer a quick comment? Or would you? I'm happy to move on because I'm content with my stance.
I think we have a view about separating out the items. There's recommendation A, recommendation B and C, and we can vote in that way if I think that is the sense of the meeting. Unless there's any other points anyone must make at this point with this item, shall we move to the vote, please? So those in favour of the amended recommendation A to approve a 0% block transfer from schools block to high needs block following the schools forum feedback. In favour? Thank you. Against? Thank you. Abstentions? Thank you. And then in favour of recommendations B and C, can we please have a show of hands in support? I believe that's unanimous. Thank you very much. Yes, so would the Democratic Services Officer just confirm the outcome of that vote?
Yeah,
Thank you.
We for recommendation A, we have 9 votes for, 2 against and 3 abstentions. So therefore the recommendation is carried. And then B and C were unanimous.
Thank you very much. Let us move. Thank you very much, officers, for that presentation and answering our questions. Can we please move on to item 5, commissioning supervised family time? So the report will be introduced by Nigel Denning, the Interim Service Director, Targeted Support and Children's Social Care. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. As my introduction, I'm currently responsible for children's social care and targeted support, but also overseeing fostering and family time, hence why I'm here today. Just as a brief introduction in terms of the report, family time is one of our statutory duties. This is for our children in care to maintain contact with their family, and there are occasions when we need to supervise that contact. You'll see from the data within the report, the majority of that time we've managed that in-house, but there will always be occasions where some of our children who don't live within the Cambridgeshire geographical area, we need to supervise that contact where they're living, but it is a small number. So the committee are being asked today to agree the commission of an external supervised family time framework that will supplement the existing in-house delivery and only be used when we're unable to do that in-house. There is no actual commitment to the spend in this framework. However, if we were to base it on previous usage and estimates looking forward with inflation, that could amount to approximately £1.5 million over the next 5 years. By commissioning it through this framework, we would not only meet our statutory duties in terms of service delivery, but also in terms of procurement rules. In terms of the length of contract, you will note that the 5 years would extend beyond the time when we would with local government reorganisation, but the way the framework will be put in place will enable that framework to be novated across and also then extended should the new local authority decide to do that, or for it to lay dormant. There is no commitment that it would have to continue. That'll be for the new local authority to determine whether they wanted to do that or not. In terms of the benefits of a framework, it not only means we're complying with our statutory duties and procurement, but it also means we've got better control in terms of cost and quality. So therefore, the recommendations this afternoon are to agree the implementation of a 5-year contract, which would essentially be 3 years with the possibility of a 2-year extension, and that's the delegated authority for awarding the contract to the executive director in consultation with the chair and vice chair. In recognition of the length of the agenda item before, I will pause for questions.
Thank you, Councillor Goodliffe.
Thank you, and thank you for the report. I have worked with a lot of children, and I see children who've been through contact, and for most children, staying in contact with family members is a very important part of there being a looked after child. I don't disagree with anything in this report. It's more what is not here. And I'm always disappointed at Children and Young People's Committee when what we don't see or hear is the voice of the children and young people and the families involved. And I'd ask in future that we could have at least some feedback from those who've used a service, so that you can get across both the import of what's being done, but also how well or not it is being done. Thank you.
I think that's something we can certainly look at in future. Yeah.
Thank you. Yes, I think it's really important to take that point on board. Thank you, Councillor Goodliffe. Councillor Edge.
So thank you for the paper, which I think it's really clear. Sorry, it's really clear, and I do support it. I do though have one question. So the estimates on 4.5 relate to inflationary growth. It also refers to increase in spend as a result of increases in the number of children in care. And although it talks about potential decreases in demand, what it doesn't clarify is whether it is taking into account the clear and positive pattern set out in 3.4 that aligns with our ambition to have more of our children in places in Cambridgeshire. Can you just confirm whether that it has been taken into account in the estimates, and therefore would you suggest that these estimates are a worst case?
Well, I can confirm it is a complex beast to protect the future in terms of the numbers of children who are in our care, let alone those that will be within Cambridgeshire and those who are with family members perhaps outside of Cambridgeshire. Our priority is for children to be in the right home at the right time. So there will always be a need for some of our children to be in these arrangements where we need to provide this supervised contact. So we have come to that figure based on predictions of likely demand, but also the improvement work that we're doing in terms of bringing more children where appropriate to do so to live inside Cambridgeshire. So I'm as confident as I can be today, Councillor Edge, that that figure will meet our future demand.
Thank you, Councillor Demery-Holman.
Thank you, Chair. It's just a quick question on me for clarity, just relating to the average cost between agencies. So if I look in paragraph 3.3, we're talking £111 rising to 122 per hour in the first quarter of 25 to 26. When I go to the alternative options in 5.1b, it talks about hourly rates being often exceeding 70 to 80 pounds, and the in-house provision is around 25 pounds per hour. Could you just clarify which numbers we should be operating on? And also, I welcome a bit more detail on what creates such a high cost for agency. I'm sure we can assume some of it, but some detail would be great. Thank you.
So one of the benefits of having a framework will be to provide some consistency of cost to alleviate some of those issues as you've observed. So there'll be a capping within the framework. So that will almost immediately get away with some of those issues, and also allow some consistency of quality. And so there is significant variability at the moment between providers and where they are in the country, but the framework will even that out. So that will sort that out.
Thank you. Councillor Goldsack.
Thank you, and thank you for a comprehensive report. Again, a naive question, which probably requires a very simplistic answer. If all our supervised family time arrangements outside our council area, geographic area, are delivered by third-party companies, has any work been done to have those delivered by neighbouring councils while we deliver theirs? Because there seems to be a significant cost difference in the ability for Cambridgeshire County Council to deliver supervised family time as opposed to an external agency.
It may well be something that the region might want to look at, but what I would say is some of these children are placed way outside of the region. I only signed off this week a child that was living in Wales, for example. But certainly when we're looking at regional commissioning, that's something we could explore as we further conversations around sufficiency.
Well, okay, I recognise you said this week for sorry, Chair, through you recognised through the but in 3.5 it's got Norfolk, Essex, Suffolk, Hertfordshire, London, Lincolnshire, Kent and Derbyshire. Now possibly Kent and Derbyshire are a little bit too far away, but the vast majority of the children that we've got in care outside our area are in neighbouring geographic areas. I'm just thinking a quid pro quo arrangement where Norfolk look after our dozen of people that we've got in theirs, and we've probably got a dozen of their people in Cambridgeshire that we can look after. There must be some significant cost-saving approaches that we could do that. And moreover, I'd be very interested to know whether there's any qualitative data that could define the level of care received. Sorry, the level of care received by a child from its own constituent county, as opposed to level of care received from a child with an external agency. So are we better at doing it in-house than an external agency? We're certainly lower price.
So one of the challenges is to ensure quality. So this is about providing care. This is about providing that supervised observations often. So quality is definitely important to us because sometimes this is information that goes through as part of assessments and for courts. Certainly that issue around looking at our neighbouring authorities. I'm not aware of that conversation taking place, Councillor Goldsack, but happy to raise that with my peers and other authorities to see if there's an appetite for it.
Okay, Chair, through you, is that something that we could put on the forward book so that we know and have that come back to us? Because it seems to me, I don't know whether I'm being daft here, but it seems eminently sensible that these conversations take place. I'd like to think that could come back with significant savings. Whether we've got the capability and in terms of numbers to do it is a different matter, but the principle behind it certainly needs researching.
Martin.
Yeah, I think the Eastern region. So the arranging a quid pro quo arrangement is incredibly complicated. What we want to have is a contracted arrangement whereby we are guaranteed to get the service that we want when we want it, rather than just doing quid pro quo. There is a regional DCS meeting in a week's time, so I will put this as an AOB and find out if there is appetite for that. But what we want to do through this process is to ensure quality and consistency wherever the children are by the providers, and that will be part of the specifications through this tender. And also, I think what I wanted to draw attention to was if we follow the chart down on the chart that starts at 3.4 on page 4 and goes down, you can see how hard the service works to minimise the number of hours that we actually use from external agencies. So September last year was the highest demand for total family time, and it was the smallest number of hours that we contracted out. So we always try and deliver in-house whenever we can, because we feel that, in response to something you said earlier, we feel that this is the best quality. It's delivered by people that we can be sure are consistent for the young person and is cost effective.
Thank you, but it is a fair point to sort of ask the question about whether there would be efficiency savings by kind of quid pro quo arrangements in some ways. So I think it's worth asking the question, and I think we should answer it. And it may very well be, it does make sense. It may be that there are reasons
I
why
think we've got everything to gain, Chair, by asking
Absolutely.
and understanding the situation and nothing to lose. So I think it'd be well worth doing.
Absolutely,
Thank you,
totally
Martin.
agree. Thank you. Thank you for that. Councillor Whelan.
Thank you, Chair. Just as a general sort of question, really, what opportunities are there for earlier intervention to reduce reliance on supervised contact? Are there any?
We do have an extensive targeted and early help offer in Cambridgeshire. We're also with the Families First reforms that are taking place nationally. One of the key drivers there is to support families and provide help much earlier to prevent those children needing to come into care. So that is definitely one of our key drivers. And I would like to say Cambridgeshire has a strong targeted and early help offer for us to build on. It's a part of that programme.
So, and on top of that, where children do have to come into our care and need to have the family time, then we also look at whether there are other members of their own family and friends network that could do that reliably as well. So we try and look at all ways we can do that other than commissioning it.
Thank you. Councillor Martin.
Thank you very much, Chair. And I'm glad to hear the comments of Martin about that we would always priority doing in-house first before going outside, because reading the figures here, the 3 times plus increase in cost is concerning. The question I have, though, is absolutely we're going to try and minimise having to use the framework. That's the right thing to do. But at what point do we invest in our own service to the point that we have empty capacity within our own service, which could, looking at the numbers in front of us, would still work out cheaper than outsourcing 1 hour? You know, we could insource 3 spare capacity hours for the cost of 1 external hour. So at what point are we looking internally to invest that extra £300,000 to have the extra capacity in-house, obviously having the framework as a fallback, as a safety net, just in case we're unable to accommodate in-house?
There will always be occasions when children will not be able to be within the Cambridgeshire area. Therefore, actually having this framework in place is always going to be necessary, because it will be more cost effective to pay for a local provider to do that supervised contact than for us to send in-house provision to travel all that distance, and we're spending a lot of money then on people to travel. So obviously we will keep a very close eye on the trends and the data, and as you'll see from the figures, the numbers have increased in terms of internally. That's twofold. One is about us prioritising our local in-house provision, but also it's an indication of the improvements we've made to the numbers of kinship carers and foster carers and placements for children within Cambridgeshire, and that's part of our strategy to continue that.
Okay, that's really useful information. So from the paper in front of us, in that table 3.4, it says about the total agency covered in the month. How many of those hours do you say are for so people outside of Cambridgeshire, and how many of those are for looked after children within Cambridgeshire?
So the right-hand column, which is percentage of family time that we've commissioned to other agencies, that will be for those children who are placed outside of area where it's not economically viable for us to be doing it from our in-house staff.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Tong, then Stewart, then Sidlow.
Hello. Firstly, can I thank you for this report on such an important subject? I also agree that it's really great to see how much work we're doing in-house, because, well, I know what good work we do. I think it would be good to try and substantiate with that with actual testimonials from the service users themselves. But, well, in-house stuff that we can have control over is great. One thing I did want to talk about was the alternative options, specifically related to the fact that we are currently producing some proposals to grow the in-house team. And I was wondering if we could get a bit more detail about that process, a potential timeline for it, because this seems like an exciting opportunity to potentially improve the service even further.
So in terms of, there are no plans for growth at the moment. We are meeting demand, but we also do sometimes have to supplement our family time with other parts of our workforce when demand increases, and we do go through certain trends. But at the moment, there are no investment plans to grow that service as yet. But that's something we could look at future if we find that the demand significantly outweighs our current capacity.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Stewart, then Sidlow.
Good afternoon. I just wanted to know how often provider performance will be reviewed and what specific escalation or correction steps will take place if they don't meet expected standards and safeguarding requirements.
It's a very good question and a level of detail I don't have to hand, but I'm happy to provide that once we get to that stage of going out to procurement. I'm sure we could provide that level of detail.
Thank you. I think that would be an important point. Thank you. Councillor Sidlow.
My question was similar, to be honest. Councillor Goldsack mentioned quality, and you said quality is very important, and it says in the paper framework will require the provider to demonstrate the quality of their services, but there's actually no information about how they do that and what you expect. So I'd like to see how that's audited and how it's compared to our in-house service. Might turn out they're even doing it better. Maybe we could learn something in-house. I don't know, but those are the kinds of things I'd like to see as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I'm sure those points are taken on board. Yes, thank you very much. So are there any points of debate? No, I think so. I think we'll move to the vote on the recommendations, please. We'll take them both together. I've heard nothing to suggest that we would take them separately. So we'll vote on them together, please. Those in favour of the two recommendations, please raise their hands now. Thank you very much. That's unanimous. So would the Democratic Services Officer just confirm it for us for the record?
Yes, unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Moving on to item 6. This is the early years and childcare contracts, March 26 to April 27. We'll have a report introduced by Alison Kramer, Assistant Director for Education, and Rachel Pinion, the Strategic Manager for Place Planning and Education Capital. Please give us an introduction to your report. Thank you.
Thank you. The Children and Young People's Committee is asked to delegate responsibility for awarding and executing 5 contracts for the provision of early years and childcare scheduled from March 26 through to April 27 and extension periods to the Executive Director for Children, Education and Families and the Executive Director for Finance and Resources in consultation with the Chair and Vice Chair of the Committee. The contracts are for the following provisions. It's for early years provision at 69 High Road, Gorefield, early years provision at the Barn, Ashbeach School, early years and wraparound provision at the former Somersham Children's Centre in Somersham, wraparound provision at Over Primary School, and wraparound provision at Brampton Village Primary School. The contracts will be awarded through the pseudo-dynamic purchasing system, and this system has been running for 4 years and was set up to establish a framework for early years providers with additional flexibility that allows providers to join annually so that early years and childcare can be procured as required. The pseudo-dynamic purchasing system is a register of providers who have an interest in running early years or childcare from council-owned premises and have been approved by the council. This report sets out the contracts that need to be procured from the period April 26 to March 27 to ensure that the council can ensure sufficient and suitable childcare places. The contracts are proposed for an initial term of 5 years with the potential to extend for a further 5 years. And these longer periods aim to provide stability for both the providers so that they can build occupancy and reputation, and for parents to ensure continuity of care. And this is also to ensure that there is interest from the market for these opportunities. The contract values in this report have been calculated on the funding rates and the opening hours for each setting and using an estimated daily rate for wraparound care, and they provide the estimated income for the provider.
that would be funded from the early years block of the Dedicated Schools grant as part of the early years funding formula. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Do you have questions? Yep. Councillor Martin.
Thank you very much, Chair. I have a question to clarify one of the recommendations, and then a separate question. So the first one is, I know, so Brampton Village Primary School, I noticed I have visited them in the past before I was a county councillor. And I see on here that it mentions that they're going to move from a license to be replaced with a lease. Can you just expand what the difference is between the two and how that could impact both the school and any future provider? Because I know that there is a difference between the two terms.
Okay, so we generally use a license when the space is shared, while a lease is a longer term, more permanent arrangement for exclusive use of the space.
Okay, so on that point, from my understanding, the Brampton Village Primary School service is a shared space, and that they share the majority of the classrooms because of the wraparound nature of their service. So is that consistent with what's in front of us, or are we looking to move away from the current model of how that service is delivered into a different model of how that service is delivered?
At Brampton, the early years provider has one room and the out of school provision has another. So they're in separate spaces.
Okay, if I can move on to the second question that I had. In the last 48 hours or so, I've had 2 preschools contact me, not ones in this report, but other preschools that are going through a similar process at the moment, talking about the PDPS and the system more broadly. Now, we all accept that we have to go through the system. The current setup that we've got and the current contracts aren't legal, and they don't fit the frameworks that we must work under as a council. But the feedback that I've had is that current providers don't feel like they're getting adequate support in going through the system. A lot of them are small businesses or charities. They don't feel that they're getting the support that they would need to go through this system, which is open. And their feeling is that it's opening it up for big national companies to try and swoop in and take these contracts. Now, we'll all accept that continuity is important for our children, and sometimes that is the continuity of providers. So how do you differentiate, or what assessments do you make, and how do you weight a current provider and the benefit that they bring to the current community when making decisions under the PDPS? Because a lot of providers are unsure on how that works and are very, very nervous as a result of it.
Okay, thank you. I think to start with, there are currently 43 providers on our PDPS, and that's made up of 17 small to medium enterprises, 18 voluntary community and social enterprises, 3 national suppliers, 2 multi-academy trusts, and 3 that are new to the sector. So the numbers that are on the PDPS show that there is a widespread of people that have applied and have joined. In terms of the support that we offer, we advertise the opportunity through the newsletters, and we also have dedicated workshops that interested providers can come to, and we can answer any questions at those workshops and also provide contact details afterwards. And officers have worked with numerous applicants on how to work through the process and make sure that we're not disadvantaging small providers.
If I can just come back on to the second part of that, is there any weighting that's given to a current provider that is in place? Obviously, this isn't their fault. The fact that the county council's procurement process hasn't been done properly in the past, and we're now rectifying that, isn't their fault. So is there any weighting that goes in favour of current providers, or is it a complete blank check and we're starting from scratch and they have to fight, tooth and nail with everybody else, and it's a spreadsheet decision at the end of the day?
We can't weight it for the current provider. However, the assessment is based 90% on quality and 10% on their rent proposition. So a current provider would, like lots of our questions to do with how would you work with the community? And if they're able to evidence that already, they would score highly on that question. Partnership working with the local school and transition arrangements with the school if it's early years or wrap around at the end of the school day. So those current providers will be able to tell a lot of experience and are likely to score quite highly on those questions.
Thank you very much. Councillor Manning.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a bit of a newbie question first, although technically this was the first committee I was ever on the County Council 16 years ago, which makes me feel very old. This snappily titled PDPS, it's described as a system. What does that mean? Is it an IT system? Is it just a bunch of spreadsheets? Is it some horrendous form we send that's got to be filled in? Can you just give a bit of detail? I've got a second question, but it's not related.
Yeah, agreed that it's not a particularly great name for describing what it is. However, procurement of advice, that's what we need to call it. Essentially, we think of it as a framework. However, providers can join on an annual basis. So it's not technically a proper framework. And the reason we've set it up like that is to ensure that local providers that maybe didn't know about it at the beginning are able to join on an annual basis when they are kind of, become aware that maybe their provision is going to come through this process. So that's why it is pseudo-dynamic as opposed to dynamic when you can join any time.
So, sorry, just is it something they log into, or do they have? How do they interact with it?
So we have a portal called ProContract, and that's what procurement use for all of our contracts. So it's not really a system. Essentially, it's a framework. We can't call it a framework.
Understood. The second question was about the 6.5 in the paper, so the climate change. It's really good that you're following through with the council's vision. I was just wondering how you actually monitor whether they're actually complying with our carbon charter. And I'm assuming we don't have any powers to enforce, but how do we monitor what they're actually doing in any way to check they're actually doing what they set out to do?
There are KPIs within the contracts for the providers, but I don't have the detail of those, so we would need to come back to you with a response on that to clarify
fine,
if it's covered in that.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Goodliffe.
Thank you, Chair. I was contacted last night by parents who use the wraparound provision at Brampton Village Primary School. And they had a number of queries about this process regarding that. One was previously mentioned, the change to a lease, and they said that confused them because it is shared school space, is what they'd said. In 3.1, it says that all incumbent providers operating had been notified of this intention. They said they'd spoken to the owners and they hadn't been notified about the change. So we're quite kind of confused. You've answered some of my next question with the 90% of the evidence being able to be shown by an incumbent provider. But in this case, it's a provider that had up till last week an excellent Ofsted rating. They haven't had their results of last week's Ofsted yet. They have very low fees compared to bigger providers and can demonstrate how much they prioritise inclusion and accessibility versus profit. So with all of this in mind, that 90%, I assume, includes a lot of weighting towards the social value and the inclusion and accessibility that this sort of provider can demonstrate. Thanks.
In terms of the Brampton recommendation, at this point we have recommended a lease. Under procurement regulations, there's a big emphasis on market engagement and changing your procurement to reflect that. That's the next step in this process. So if we get permission to call off on this contract, we'll be able to go out to the community, the head teacher, the current provider, and talk to them and discuss with them what actually on the ground does this need to look like. And if actually it is more appropriate that it's a license, then we could propose that through the procurement kind of plan. And then Martin and the chair and vice chair would be able to look at that and approve it under his delegated authority. So yes, it's absolutely something that we would want to do. In terms of not being notified, the out of school provider is currently on the PDPS, and they were notified of that when they were awarded that.
Thank you very much. Councillor Damery-Holman.
I think actually Councillor Goodliff has asked all the questions that I was going to ask on that topic. Thank you, Bryony.
Thank you very much. Councillor Goldsack.
Thank you. Thank you again for the report and the presentation. My question is a little bit historic, but you learn a lot from history. Some time ago in my own ward, there was found to be favourable operating conditions to a provider of these services in our facilities versus private suppliers of wraparound care in their own facilities. So there was non-charging of council tax because that was being taken care of as being part of the school, etc., etc. Are you, as officers and as senior directors in this case, are you absolutely happy that you have covered all eventualities here and you're not given an unfair advantage over supplier to supplier A over supplier B, who would probably give their right arm to get in said premises?
I'm really, really confident in the PDPS and working really closely with procurement and making sure that everything is followed to the letter, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Edge.
Thank you. Yeah, it's just one quick question. Quick clarification, really, for me and maybe some other newer members. So the advertisement timeline is for a 1-year period, which on face value for me feels like quite a long time, not understanding the process obviously in full. Does that assume a closure date on the application in April rather than applications securing a deal ahead of that date? And if so, what is the expected date of any resulting contracts actually commencing?
Sorry, can you just point out which part of the report you're referring to?
I think it's because it isn't in the report. I'm just trying to understand clarification on why there's a 1-year advertisement of the process and what that actually means timeline wise moving on from that.
Okay, I understand. So essentially we've put them as the call-offs will happen at some point during this year, and that's precisely so that we can do them at the right time for those local communities. So it's making sure that any transfer period between providers could sit over the holidays, like if there's less demand or if it's a term time provision and it's closed. And also in terms of officer time and the support that we can provide if we space those call-offs out over the year rather than doing them all in one go. So it's not saying it's going to take a year, it's just we're going to take these call-offs throughout the year.
Sorry, just for clarification then. So what you're actually stating is that although it says in the paper that this is asking for it for 1 year, it's so that you've got the freedom to be able to do that at the appropriate time. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for that clarification. Are there any points for debate? Councillor Sidlow.
I just wanted to ask 3.5. Property surveyor will carry out a market valuation of the property to determine suitable rental income, and that on occasion it may be necessary to seek reduced income to ensure viability. So that's based on location, size of the building, all that kind of stuff. To me, that just doesn't make sense. They're providing a certain amount of care that we have to provide, and we're giving them funding for that. Surely the rent could be based on the number of children they're going to be looking after, taking that out of the equation altogether, meaning that they could focus 100% on the quality of what they're delivering, as opposed to having to try and one-up each other on how much they can pay the council for rent. That makes sense?
In relation to that, the evaluation and moderation process really focuses on quality as the sort of predominant factor that's considered. So the income received is it's really the sort of process where school providers score equally on quality. It's only at that point you'd look to determine whether the payment of rent was a factor in terms of the highest rent received. So I think it's 90% is on quality of the provider. So it is the main factor in the evaluations.
So if you get two bids, one's lower, but quality, you determine quality to be higher, you will accept a reduced rent for that higher quality?
Yeah, the rent is only factored in if the two highest scoring bids were exactly the same in quality. And then you would choose the rent as the factor. So if you had a provider with a higher quality, wouldn't take into account the rent, they would be awarded it.
Thank you. Are there any points of debate? Members happy to move to the vote? Thank you very much. I've heard no suggestions that we vote in any other way than for the recommendations on block. So if I may have hands up in favour of these recommendations. I believe that is unanimous.
Yes, that's unanimous, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, colleagues. Right, if we may move on to item 7, the Denia Primary Academy. The report is, thank you very much, by the way, for that, for your support in the previous item. Sarah, Service Director, Education, and Alison Kramer, Assistant Director for Education, will introduce the item on the Denia Primary Academy.
Thank you, Chair. So the purpose of this report is to seek approval for entering into an engineering and construction contract with Kia Construction for Denia Primary Academy, with the key recommendations to approve contract with Kia Construction for construction starting in April 2026 within the budget of 20,413,000. And to delegate authority for contract execution to the Executive Director of Children, Education and Families in consultation with Chair and Vice Chair of this committee, and to approve the installation of a bio-solar green roof system with multi-layer waterproofing. By way of background, the Council has a statutory duty to provide sufficient school places. Denia Primary Academy will be a three-form entry school, providing an additional 630 places to meet demand from Waterbeach Newtown development. Construction, subject to decision today, construction would start on April 2026 with a completion date of July 2027. What we do know is that pupil demand has not grown as expected, and there is a table within the report that illustrates that the school will not be required until September 2028. So what we're proposing is that the school is used for community and early years provision by the Anglian Trust. And you'll be aware that there is an expanded childcare expectation nationally at the moment, which this will help us to support. We're making this recommendation because it's more cost efficient. The early handover to Anglian Learning avoids 579,000 costs of delaying the programme. So in summary, the Council has statutory duties with regard to sufficiency, diversity and planning of places for early years and statutory school-aged children. To ensure that it can meet these obligations, the Council must procure services from external providers for the delivery. The award of this construction contract to Kia is a key step in this process. And I'd just like to make the point, I'd like to apologise for a small error in the summary that refers to the sprinklers as a recommendation. That was included in error. In January 23, we agreed that sprinklers would be included for recommendation only where we were not proposing to include them. So there was a default position to always include sprinklers. So I'm happy to pause, take questions, points of clarification. Thank you.
Councillor Damery-Hill.
Chair, apologies. I would actually just welcome some advice on the declaration. I'd welcome some advice on a potential declaration. So my sister is a bid writer for Kia Construction and she writes bids for schools. I have no idea whether she's involved in this project, but it is making me a little bit nervous. So I would welcome any advice. And apologies to spring this on you now.
If you feel uncomfortable, then I would suggest that you step out. But I mean, you don't know?
I have no idea if you're okay, Claire, I might step out just to be super safe on this.
Well, I'm very happy for you to step out. I think it's always good to be safe on these matters. Thank you for raising it there.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Tamar, for the advice.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Hi there. Oh, sorry.
Advice, sorry. We do have a statement which I'm advised needs to be read out first.
So I have a statement from the local member for Waterbeach from Councillor Bradnam. She couldn't make the meeting today. So I'll just read that out. I'm pleased to see the proposal for the new primary school at Waterbeach, Newtown, has been revised and is being brought forward. There has been a tension between the promise of a new primary school and its anticipated delivery date. Young families already living there are aggrieved that the promised school has not yet been delivered, and prospective purchasers are reluctant to buy without a primary school being in place. This has depressed the sales of new homes. I welcome the prospect of the new primary school being built and opening, which will, to some extent, unlock sales of homes in the new town. Meantime, I am mindful that delivery and the shiny new Denair Primary Academy in the catchment of the existing Waterbeach Community Primary School could draw children to the new school and leave the school in the village with an unsustainable low student roll. I understand that the Denair Primary Academy will initially only provide nursery places. Please would you reassure me that the opening of the new school will be managed such that the new school will open only when there are sufficient pupil numbers for both primary schools to be sustainable.
Yeah, sorry, I wasn't sure they were supposed to respond. Yes, I think the table in the report sets out that by September 2028, we will require an additional 46 places, which is why we're saying that we would not open this, the school in advance of that date. But we're proposing that the site is used because it's more cost effective in advance of that opening date for the community use and early years provision that I referred to earlier.
Right, Councillor Gold.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sir. Just for the avoidance of doubt, are fire sprinklers included in this construction?
Yes, fire sprinklers are included in this. What I was saying at the start was it's not as a recommendation because we had a previous agreement that sprinklers would be included in all new schools. So they are included.
In response to that, then, this is as safe as a school design can be against modern criteria.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for that clarification. Councillor Ton.
Good afternoon. It's great we're building new schools. Obviously, there's a huge demand for them, and we need to make sure that children are getting a high standard of education. Something I wanted to briefly touch on, which is, well, only briefly touched in the report, is recommendation C, the installation of a biosolar green roof system. This sounds great. I think it's really important that we add to biodiversity in these sites, both for the benefit of people and planet. I was wondering if you could go into a bit more about why this choice was chosen as a way to improve biodiversity, and, well, just a good chance to talk about some of the work you're doing and hopefully get people to understand the reasonings behind the project.
Yes, so the council's previously specified multi-layer bitumen roofing systems in school projects as a result of fabric failures found in single-ply systems. And so this project includes a bio-solar green roof system with the multi-layer waterproofing protection to ensure that the requirements around site greening and biodiversity net gain are met. So it comprises a green roof system which is laid over a bitumen roof system topped with a root-resistant planting membrane to support the green roof planting, and the costs for that roof specification have been able to be included within the budget and the overall costs for the scheme.
Thank you very much. Councillor Martin.
Thank you very much, Chair. And I've gone through this process a couple of times with officers, obviously with Saltbrook Primary School in Sawtry and most recently Acme World Church Academy, which I had the pleasure of signing the seal on Friday, which was really good to see. And it's great to see new schools being built in our area. My concern is around the forecast of numbers of students, because we've seen with the other two that I've mentioned that the numbers have slipped over a number of years. Is there any, and I apologise if this is more of a commercial saying, any ghost funding? So if we have to keep the school closed for an additional year or 2 years past the date that we've currently set, is the county council required to pay the trust some kind of ghost funding or some kind of funding to keep it closed? And if so, is that factored into the 20 million that's in front of us, or will that be additional funding that would have to come further down the line and agreed further down the line?
Yeah, so we have an agreement in principle that Anglian Learning will take the site on completion, and we have and obviously, as I've described, that is a more cost-effective solution rather than the ongoing maintenance costs to keep an empty school open. And we're working closely with the Anglian Trust to ensure that that is cost-effective, and we will aim to support them within the budget of the proposed development of the school.
Thank you very much. Councillor Stewart.
Good afternoon. Firstly, I just want to express my disappointment that provision for children with SEND has not begun in terms of the building work of the new school in my division of Gamlingay. Although it is very, very positive to see that provisions are being put in place that link directly to children with SEND. And I'm broadly supportive of the scheme for the new primary school. But I'm keen to understand how the £500,000, it seems, for high needs capital allocation is protected, and from future issues in terms of building work that might take place. So essentially, how will the money that is directly linked to children with SEND be protected?
Okay, so within our section 106 allocation, there is provision for SEND, and we have got an allocation built into the costs of the scheme. We had a previous report that came to committee that recognised the increase in demand for SEND places where we increased the yield. So as part of that section 106 allocation, I think it went from 1.5% to 2.6%, but I will confirm those figures for you. So that we are ensuring that our school schemes are reflective of that increased demand for SEND provision. And in terms of how that can be utilised within a school, obviously it can provide space for children who are struggling to remain in mainstream classes and give them that short break where they can regulate their emotions and then return to class. So that is something that we have built into the cost of the scheme.
Sorry, will the funding be for that? Will it be ring-fenced? So will it be protected?
It has been included in the contract sum to provide an additional SEND space, so it will be specific, and we will work closely with the trust and the contractors to ensure the delivery of that through the implementation of the scheme.
Thank you very much for that clarification. Councillor Sidlow.
Thank you. I just wanted to talk about the green roof system and ask a few questions. First of all, it sounds lovely having a green roof. And my research into it shows it provides insulation, stormwater management, UV protection, and obviously the biodiversity point that Councillor Tong made, something that I definitely agree with. However, it did make me think there's also a PV system on the roof. Is that going above the green space, or is that going elsewhere on the roof? Because if it's going above, is it going to cause shade to the green roof? It's going to make it harder to manage, and are we using space that could otherwise be used for PVs, regardless of my views on those?
I think they're quite technical questions, so if you don't mind, we will take that away and come back to you on those points.
Okay, thank you. My other concerns was that there's build complications associated with these. I'm sure have been taken into account, and that the contractor who's going to carry out the work will be competent and do a good job. However, those will come with costs, specifically excess weight and extra drainage considerations, structural implications. And then there's also the extra maintenance costs over time with root intrusion and the possibility of leaks, and then the actual detection and fixing of those leaks when you've got a field on top of your roof. So it also depends what they're planning to plant, the extra cost of gardening, weeding, fertilizing. So I was after knowing what the lifespan and the cost of the planned roof is, and how that would compare to conventional roofing, whether that money could be spent elsewhere. And sorry, already said that bit. I was thinking, would it not be better to spend the money increasing biodiversity within the grounds? Because I'm presuming the children aren't going to be able to access this green space, or if they are, there's going to have to be a lot of safety precautions put in place, which again is going to cost more money. Surely planting a wildflower meadow, few trees, a wildlife pond within the grounds of the school would meet the same biodiversity requirements without all the extra cost. Be a lot easier to maintain and be accessible for the children. So those are my thoughts on the subject. Thank you.
Yeah, again, I think I will probably have to take some of those questions away, but what I can say is that when you're talking about the potential costs that could be realised from progressing with the bio-solar roof system, we have, and it mentions within the report, there's always a contingency budget attached to any school build, and we've also made reference to a number of risks that we've identified, which we have obviously built into that scheme. But on those specific points, we can come back to you on those.
Yeah, because the point I wanted to make is if this money is being spent on that, depending on how much it is, that's money coming out of things that can be done elsewhere within the building, potentially providing extra SEN spaces, or and also you're handing over the maintenance costs to the trust that's taking over, but that's going to come out of their budget as well, which would otherwise be used for other materials for the pupils while they're there.
I think the one point I would make is that in terms of our corporate commitment, obviously one of the drivers in terms of this project is to meet our sufficiency duty, but also we have a corporate ambition to be carbon neutral and to obviously promote or limit the impact of climate change, and to have, a focus in terms of the green economy. So, that's been a balanced risk in terms of informing the scheme.
Just a point of clarification, I'm not opposed to the solar panels if they're going on new builds. We could go into that in more detail, but I understand that that's a consideration. But I also think the green space and the biodiversity and that side of the green agenda could potentially be achieved a lot more cheaply and potentially to more benefit to the students.
Sorry, my final point would be obviously in all of our schemes we have to demonstrate value for money, and we do have a technical assessor as part of this. So although the contract's been awarded to Kia Construction, we also have a technical assessor who ensures that we look at value for money in terms of all aspects of the build. So that would have been a key consideration in the proposals that we are making.
Thank you very much for that. Are there any points of debate? Are members happy to take these recommendations en bloc? Councillor Sidlow.
Sorry, could we not vote on? Could we vote separately on A and B and not and C? Is that okay? Purely because without the information I've asked for, I wouldn't feel comfortable voting for item C.
So A and B together, C separately. I'm happy to do that if that helps. Right, so the committee's asked to approve the first 3 recommendations. We'll look at A and B together. Can I please ask for support for those? And it's unanimous with,
Yes, that's
obviously with
unanimous.
1 absent member.
Yeah, but it's unanimous, yes.
Unanimous, thank you. And then on recommendation C, can we have hands up in support? Eleven for, against? None, abstain? 2.
Yeah, that's 2 abstentions, so the recommendation's carried. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Moving to item 8 and mindful of time, I wonder if we can deal with this item in a reasonable time and then take a short break. So this is about porting funding for education capital expansion works to academy trusts. This is a topic we have discussed and indeed voted on previous occasion, noting that Appendix 2 is confidential and exempt from publication. If members wish to discuss this appendix, it will be necessary to move this item to the end of the meeting, at which point we would need to go into private session. So could I please have an indication if anyone wants to debate that particular confidential matters in the confidential item? No, so we can deal with it now. If items come up, I'm afraid we will have to then move into private session, move it to the end of the meeting. But let us proceed for now. We have Sarah Callahan and Alison Kramer, pleased to present the report.
Thank you, Chair. The purpose of this report is to seek approval to transfer capital funding to 2 academy trusts for school expansion projects. And it, as you said, aligns with principles agreed at the Children and Young People's Committee in June. The specific recommendations are to approve porting of capital contributions to the Anglian Learning Trust for expansion of Icknield Primary, which will create 30 primary places and 26 early years places, and for Astrea Academy Trust for improvement and expansion at Long Sands Academy. As I've said at the earlier report, Council has a statutory duty to provide sufficient school and childcare places. Both trusts have met the competency standards set out within the vetting process submitted alongside this report. In terms of managing any risk, the grant funding agreement includes collateral warranties and step-in rights for the council and indemnity against Section 106 breaches, and the funding is entirely funded by Section 106. The grant funding agreement does provide clawback provisions for any underspends, and there is a technical advisor appointed to ensure that we have regular gateway checks in terms of meeting the expectations for this proposal. So we did consider alternative options, a council-led delivery, but this was deemed to be much more least disruptive and also enabled the trusts to make better use of the funding by also being used in line with other capital developments within the trusts. So I'll pause there for questions, any points of clarification. Thank you.
Are there any questions or clarification? Councillor Martin.
Thank you very much, Chair. Is the funding that's going to be provided to the two trusts going to be phased? So as the development goes along, that they will receive a chunk of money in the way that house builders and commercial development builders would normally receive their funds?
Yeah, the process would be there would be gateway reviews during the process as the funding is passported to the trusts, and so that would be set out in the individual grant agreements with the trusts as to which point the funding's released.
Thank you. Councillor Edge.
So thank you. So from what was set out, it's clear that Longsands still has stretch in its capacity. Therefore, funding is set out to be utilised for much needed improvements to the existing facilities. With the imminent Schools White Paper on the horizon and considerations of our Inclusion for All programme, I'd hope that officers will be able to influence Australia Trusts either through this ported funding or future anticipated funding to make sure both inclusion and SEND spaces are given foremost consideration. Is there scope for this now or in the future?
In terms of our relationship with the Australia Trust, I met with the CEO and senior leaders from the Trust last week, and we have a positive ongoing relationship, and the vetting process to support this, was entirely met by that Trust. In terms of support to SEND, like every school across the county, they're looking to ensure that their processes are inclusive, and that was the point of our discussion. And they do have flexible use currently in terms of how they support children with additional needs. So obviously it's for the Trust to determine exactly how they use that space, but they already have ongoing practice where children are able to take time out, as I described previously, to enable them to then have that space to return to the classroom. And we are working with all of our trusts, and I regularly attend the CEO group for all of the multi-academy trusts, so that we've still got that ongoing relationship to ensure that the principles of Inclusion for All underpin all of the approach across all of our schools.
Thank you very much. Councillor Goldsack, then Councillor Stewart.
Thank you. Just a very quick one. On the ICNIL one, Sarah, we're looking at 56 new places. When I read the terms of porting, what was the correct title? The vetting of Academy Trust for Capital Delivery. That's a better title than porting. It said that if they were over 20%, it's highly unlikely. Is 56 pupil growth less than 20% of the existing school size, or have you decided in this case that they've passed the criteria to be able to do this?
It does fit. It's below the 20%.
So are they is it a two-form entry school at the moment?
I think that's the case. I'll just confirm that. But I know that we did, in terms of the vetting process, the criteria attached to that vetting process is that it's not more than a 20% increase, and this did meet the terms of that.
Again, just to further qualify that, in that 20%, preschool numbers count if they're linked to the school, do they?
I believe it's applied just from year one, so I think that's why the increase does fit within that 20%.
So that's the wrinkle in the process, isn't it? Whereby the volume of the work is that big, but the volume of work we're counting is that big. So therefore, that they've met the criteria for us to port the money across. Does that make sense?
They've absolutely met the criteria for it being less.
They have, based on a single form growth of 30 30 pupils, but with the 26 extra pupils coming in, what I'm wondering is are they not counted because they're preschool, or are they counting as still under the 10%, 20%?
Yeah, I'll just confirm that for you. But what I can categorically say is that it is below the 20%. How it shifts across early years and primary, I'll just go into.
I think it's important. Sorry to put you on the spot, but I think it's important that we understand whether the preschool element, the early years places of 26, are in that calculation or not. Otherwise, I could imagine a lot of trusts will be looking at this and thinking, "Oh, right, there's no issue with us doing this level of development. We could take this."
Yeah, I think it's applicable to statutory school age, which obviously early years sits outside of, which is why the 20% would apply to the primary places. And this actually does benefit us in terms of enabling us to meet that expanded childcare offer. So I'm confident that this does fit within that 20% as set out within the vetting process.
Okay, I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Stewart.
I think you probably know what I'm going to say. Given that the council is now enabling capital funding to be ported to academy trusts to meet sufficiency and SEND pressures, can officers confirm whether this approach could be explored for the development of green sands in Gamlingay? And if not, what specific criteria are currently preventing that from being processed?
I think the distinction here is that Gamlingay and those two schools are full schools. This is a process to allow capital expansion. And as you've said, those two schools have been delayed, but we have had recent update from the DfE. And the DfE have, so those two schools combined would create an additional 270 places, 60 SEMH, social emotional mental health, and 210 autistic spectrum disorder. What the DfE have presented to us is an option to either progress as planned with those two new schools, or to alternatively meet local need by accepting 50,000 per place. We're in the process of pulling together an options appraisal, which will go to Martin's leadership team and then on to a wider discussion and support. We have a deadline of February 26th to go back to the DfE on that issue. So it's positive news that we've received that update from the DfE, but it's quite different to the proposal that we're making here today.
That's brilliant news. Thank you very much. Just on a side note, in terms of the spaces within the expansion for children with SEND, they're not spaces for children to have rest breaks. They are spaces for children to advance their learning and focus on their phonics, numeracy, and also access examination specialist arrangements. Can you please clarify if, in terms of the expansion, there will be extra allocated spaces for that?
Well, I think it's the trust obviously will use the space in the way that supports the children that demand additional support. And you're right to challenge. Obviously, part of those children being able to access a safe place is to regulate their emotions, but it's also to support them to access their learning and the curriculum. So I accept that challenge, and I know from looking round different schools that absolutely it is about ensuring that they've got the right support to access the curriculum, but also to give them that space where sometimes the classroom can become overwhelming. So it is a combination of both of those things.
Thank you very much. Are there any items for debate? Councillor Goldsack.
Just another question. Just going back on my previous question, and apologies for doing it, but I've just had a quick look. It's 196 pupils, so we're 28% if we count both sets of figures, well below the 20 if we just go with 30. So I understand. So what my question would be was, I can understand the criteria for the 30% year one, I assume, pupils. What's the criteria that must be met for trusts to be funded by council to build early years delivery?
I think it goes back to probably some of the discussion in the earlier paper. So there's obviously there's a huge expectation in terms of increasing the offer. So since September 2025, there's been an expanded childcare offer from 9 months for children from 9 months to 3 and 4, whereas previously it was just targeted 2-year-olds that met specific criteria and 3 and 4-year-olds. So there is extensive work to ensure that the delivery of those early years providers, including our schools, meets criteria in terms of the quality, but also a number of the things that were referenced within our earlier report. And I think it's fair to say also that there is a lot of the provision for early years is provided through private, voluntary and independent organisations, but within a school they would always have a qualified early years teacher, which is also something that gives us that confidence that the quality of provision there meets our expectations.
Thank you. Sarah, is there a like there is for you've put in the report here, there's a set of rules for trusts to be funded to build. Is there a set for those same schools to build for early years, or is it general gut feel and we'll see how we go and we'll present a case? I'm happy either way. I just like if there was a set of rules, I'd like to know what they are, because the demand for this must be high. And it goes back to a point I made earlier. You are absolutely right. The provision of early years and wraparound care is often a private enterprise, a small private enterprise locally based in their own premises. It's easier and better for the children, I would argue, if it's in school premises, but they have to compete on a like-for-like basis.
So I need to clarify, I think, but I think the vetting process is obviously to give us that reassurance on the school age provision. But we would not support any provision that did not meet criteria in terms of quality. So there are expectations in terms of how any school would demonstrate the quality of provision within early years also. And I think that's some of the things that we referenced in the previous report.
Okay, so in this case then, whether it be against a written down criteria for all cases or specific for this one, could we get a copy of what was agreed for this, please?
Certainly, we can provide that.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Are there any, as it were, items for debate, or have we asked all the questions that we want? And we have a recommendation to consider, which is to approve porting of capital as described. Can I please have a show of hands for those in favour? And that is unanimous.
Yes, that's unanimous, Chair.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, colleagues. I will now say we will adjourn for 10 minutes. We'll be back at 4:17. Thank you very much.
1 minute.
Right, good afternoon. Thank you very much, colleagues. We are back and looking at item 9. This is the 2026 to 29 business plan and budget. The report's going to be introduced by Martin Perbrick, the Executive Director for Children, Education and Families, and Michael Hudson, Executive Director of Finance and Resources. At the end of the debate, before we vote on the recommendations, the Executive Director will summarise the points raised by the committee and ask for approval from the committee to take them forward to Strategy and Resources and the Strategy, Resources and Performance Committee. That is to say, items raised in debate, items that we would like to recommend Strategy and Resources to consider. They will be captured by the Executive Director and feed into Strategy and Resources. So without further ado, may I please ask Martin and Michael to present the paper.
Thank you very much. So the purpose of this paper is to allow all members of the committee to scrutinise the business planning report and to ask officers present about the robustness of budget proposals to enable this committee to recommend any changes or actions for consideration by the Strategy and Resources and Performance Committee at its meeting on the 29th of January, which will then enable a budget to be proposed to full council on the 10th of February. Officers present, alongside those that you've already met, is Amy Brock and Liz Clark and Michael Hudson. Members of this committee will be acutely aware of the particular national pressures that have had an impact on services in Cambridgeshire, and the proposals in this report are in part a response to those pressures, following analysis of demand and inflation, whilst continuing to focus on ensuring that the needs of children and young people across Cambridgeshire are met, whether they are in need of early years or a school place, in need of help or protection, or in need of ongoing SEND support, or in fact are in local authority care. During the debate, officers will answer any questions that you may have. During this process, Michael and I will take note of any items that the committee want to be considered by SRMP, and we will summarise the position of those at the end of the meeting so they can be accurately fed back to Strategy, Resources and Performance Committee. The report includes proposals to invest in continued support for children in care to meet the growing demand and costs of children's placements, investments in homeschool transport to ensure that children can travel to their nearest appropriate and available education setting, as well as additional investment in direct payment packages for children with disabilities. The report also includes proposals for savings related to some of those areas, such as homeschool transport, the removal of the reserve for household support fund top-up once the household support fund comes to an end, and the investment in sustainable support for low-income families. There's also arrangements for the management and reduction of children's placement costs. There are links with wider council actions to support those experiencing poverty, such as Community, Social Mobility and Inclusion Committee, where members will discuss plans to invest £1.7 million in anti-poverty projects across the council.
Thank you very much. Michael, is there anything you would like to add?
Nothing further from me, Chair, but obviously I'll help Martin with the questions as with other colleagues.
Thank you very much. And colleagues, to note that sections 1 and 2 of the report are more council overview, whereas section 3 is the Children, Education and Families Directorate overview and more CYP specific points. Are there any questions for the officers? Councillor Demery-Hellman.
Thank you, Chair. One of my big concerns in the budget for the CYP Directorate is our holiday voucher schemes. As Vice Chair of COSMIC, I'm obviously well aware of the anti-poverty work we're doing. We're doing some fantastic things there. My concern is this is going to end very abruptly, and a lot of our anti-poverty work is focused on prevention, and it does feel like we might be leaving a bit of a gap for provision for some families. Actually, before I say any more, can I just ask a couple of questions of clarity? So we've got a couple of figures in the report and appendices. First and foremost, we see a change to key existing savings of minus 2.5 million from the ceasing of the voucher scheme, and we're also porting 1.5 million back to reserves. I would be really grateful to know exactly how much money was coming out of the household support fund that is now obviously not being delivered to us, how much we topped it up ourselves, and also, this might be a bit of a challenge, if you have a vague idea of roughly how many families are applying for these vouchers, I'd be very grateful.
I'll just get my notepad ready. Okay, so the numbers, the 1.5 million is not coming out of the household support fund. That was money that was topping up, that was used to top up where the household support fund did not meet the full cost of the holiday voucher scheme for families. In most years, the household support fund has met the value of the holiday voucher scheme. Last year, it did not. I will find that number out for you. I don't have it at the top of my mind. I also have the number of the total cost of what that would look like, which was I think 3.2 million. And I can find out how many families that related to as well. But it will take me a few minutes to do that.
Chair, if it's all right with you, I'll await the figures, and I might make some more comments on this later down the line, if that's okay.
Thank you very much. Any other questions? Councillor Edge.
I was going to come in on the same point really. So I mean, when I've kind of had a look at it, I mean, it's clear that the government's budget has kind of introduced some different grants. It's got rid of previous ones, and I think kind of understanding the complexity of that is quite complex, and understanding how that might play out is quite complex. So I welcome COSMIC kind of picking up the poverty aspect of this and making sure, as a result, and this is how it's, I think, quoted in there, in the Crisis Resilience Fund, supporting families in crisis to ensure the poorest children do not go hungry in school holidays. I think that's absolutely vital. However, when we're looking at the 1.7 that's in COSMIC to deal with this through the CRP, I'm not convinced, given where we're at as of today, that that's sufficient funding in order to support transition from where we are now to where we need to be going. So if I may, I'd like to kind of make a recommendation for consideration that we need a bit more funding to manage that transition. Suggestion of somewhere in the region of £1 million, because I think that's kind of pretty much what we're potentially looking for there.
Do you want to come back? Thank you.
I suppose I would have to defer to Michael on whether that is a possibility, Michael.
So I think the first thing to say is obviously the Crisis Resilience Fund itself, the guidance was issued late last week. So officers are continuing to go through that and to test that with government officials in terms of its exact meaning, and also with peers in terms of what that might be able to cover. Yes, in terms of the debate and discussions at COSMIC, in terms of that money that is also there in terms of support of transition. So overall, there is a significant increase in that side, but of course we've lost the household support fund in the opposite way. So officers are presently working through a spending plan for the additional crisis resilience fund monies. It's fair to say that that doesn't replicate the housing support fund and therefore couldn't replicate or replace the current voucher scheme, and is aimed at a much more targeted, more sustainable, resilient cash first type solution program that includes working with our partners, including the districts, for example, around housing. So there'll be an element over the next month or so where there's further discussions needed with those other partners in terms of what that need is, and that may differ across the geography of Cambridgeshire. So at this stage, it's hard to say what additional transition would be needed. I think, as always, and with an awful lot of children education and families spend, if money were no object, there would be an awful lot that could be done with an awful lot of money for an awful lot of good. So clearly we need to look at the confinement of that, but also staying within the guidance and the best value for that. Thankfully, the council started the Poverty Commission over 2 years now, and that actually is a direction or a set a direction that a lot of the government's own work has started to follow in terms of where we're going. So we were on the right trajectory. So as it stands at the moment, I think clearly hearing from the committee, and we'll continue to hear from the committee, we'll note it for now in terms of it's clearly has been raised. We'll hear from probably some other members. And I think the challenge back, if that were to be the committee's view to strategy, resources and performance, would be to then work with Frank Jordan as the executive director and Lisa Riddle as the service director, alongside Martin and his team, to assess what actually could be done and what's the scope within the current additional crisis resilience fund, and what might that transition look like. So I wouldn't like to say at this moment in time it's X, Y or Z, but I think we would then look at the reserves position in terms of how that might be funded, and that's something that I could certainly take away and come back to strategy and resources and performance next week. I myself give an assessment of the reserves position to that committee, and again I can pick that up through that statement. So that's something that, if this committee were minded to at the end of the debate, as we sum up, if this continues to be a direction of travel and is the overwhelming view of the committee, then we would take that back to SRMP.
Thank you very much. That's very helpful. Yes.
Sorry, thank you very much for that, Michael. I totally get that, and thank you for agreeing to take a look at it. I think just clarify on that. I think it's totally get the kind of poverty kind of crisis resilience fund side of it. I think where I think my mindset is with this, and I believe other members is that apparent cliff edge for kind of a lot of families and children that are currently receiving stuff through the household support fund, which obviously appreciate that isn't going to exist anymore. But I think the transition, the request for transition is really just to kind of manage that transition, possibly slightly less for those that would always be covered by what might happen within the crisis fund, but actually for those that are no longer going to have the fund in place, and just thinking a little bit more about what that transition might be for them.
Thank you. Noting that the key phrase, I think, is the transition, isn't it? Yes.
If I may come back, we are in active discussions with government around that transition period and what their expectations or allowance is for the Crisis Resilience Fund, noting that the Easter term itself falls in 25-26 financial year. So we are actively looking at what, if any, of the CRF monies could be used to cover the Easter term. So we will look at that, and that might then form a transition need, because some of it may be possible through the CRF monies.
Thank you, Martin.
Yes, I want to confirm the number of vouchers that was issued. So with the Christmas holiday, we ordered 25,000 vouchers for the Christmas holiday period. Over the period of time we've been doing this, there's usually about a 90% uptake. So over Christmas, that was roughly 22,500 vouchers at £15 per week.
Thank you. Yes.
Thank you, everyone, for the input there. That's very useful. I mean, I would certainly second Councillor Edge's recommendation that we look to see if we have some other funds. We've been allocated 5.3 million by the government for the Crisis and Resilience Fund. A lot of the focus of the CRF is preventative work. That's really where we as a service area want to be working. Crisis payments, again, the guidance only came out last week, and more information will be available to strategy and resources by the time papers get there. But crisis payments are a small element. I think my concern is if we're talking about a potentially 3.2 million annual spend, that's being cut. We have a 5.3 million budget for the new fund. What I would hate to see is a significant amount of crisis payment applications coming to the fund that fetters our other anti-poverty work within the fund. Obviously, the other anti-poverty work commissioned by the council is still in place. And I don't think there's any particular need for us to be prescriptive at this point on how we want this money to be available, but just having something there as a backup to ease the pressure on the CRF. And if we don't use it, obviously return to reserves. But yeah, I would certainly sleep a lot easier tonight knowing that that has been suggested to S&R. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Goodliff.
Thank you. Is this just free school meals? Because I've got a whole load of different things. Do you want the whole lot at once?
I would say just go ahead with
Okay.
your questions. Thank you.
You'll be no stranger to my shouting about free school meals. I wonder if we can look at how cost effective the scheme has been over the time. I know we get a discount on the face value, excuse me, for each voucher, and that the staff costs have been incredibly low, considering 25,000 vouchers are sent out. There's additional benefits in that a huge number of children have been proved to be eligible for free school meals, which not only gives them food during term time in schools and the vouchers at home, but obviously brings more income into our schools and nurseries, colleges, etc., to benefit those children in education. So, I mean, it looks like the Crisis Resilience Fund would be allowed to be used for this. I totally understand about permanent solutions to poverty, and far better. Things like lifting the 2-child benefit cap, for example, are huge changes. But the feedback we've always had from the free school meal vouchers over the holidays have been the difference between being able to feed their children and not, rather than being able to, have some nice food during the holiday, let alone healthy food. So huge advocate for free school meals and the impact that they have. Moving on to other issues. In 3.14, it mentions children in care and the stretch savings target for 26-27. Obviously, within this year, we've had to draw down on reserves in order to manage the overspend on children's care. And therefore, having a stretch target for next year does seem incredibly optimistic, shall I say, with this in conjunction with the removal of the funding for 2 additional homes, residential homes for children, particularly our difficult to place children within county, removing that funding and therefore removing the savings that were going to come for that. I do come from that. Let alone the fact that those children would be in regulated homes, not illegal placements. I do feel that having a stretch target is generous, shall we say. The capital programme in table 3.4 mentions, no, that's not for now, sorry, and 3.6 refers to, yeah, it is capital, refers to the choice granted to the council regarding the funding for the 2 special schools, which has already been mentioned today. Now that decision obviously needs making before next month. It does have budgetary implications as to what the council decides to do, whether it takes the money or chooses to go for the builds. And I'd like to see that specifically outlined in the budget, and possibly this is for later and I can mention it then, but it would be really good to have clarity as to where this and when this will appear on a forward agenda plan and how that decision will be made, being that it has to be made before the end of next month, and it's too big of a decision to not be made in open forum. Thank you.
Thank you. Number of points there. Would you like to take them in turn? Thanks.
Yeah, certainly. I think the cost effectiveness of the delivery of the holiday voucher scheme is noted. I think we could take that into consideration as you've requested. I don't think that's a problem. I just want to jump to the special schools the special schools. We need to do the options appraisal to look at what will be the best value for Cambridgeshire, and whether we would be able to deliver 270 school places, special school places, for the money that the Department of Education has given us for each, as proposed for each of those places. So that options appraisal is going on at the moment. The governance route would depend on whether there is a change of course or not. So having conversations with the monitoring officer about whether the course is changed, whether if we change course and we go for self-delivery, that would be a key decision. If we don't change course, the decision's already been made that we're sticking with the original route for delivery. So that will be the complications, but it'd be impossible for me to say that now because we haven't done the options appraisal, and that would be foolish to do so.
Sorry, would we be able to see that options appraisal when it comes through?
Yeah, we're happy to share that options appraisal. And the stretch target, I don't know whether there was a question there, whether you were just noting that it was exceptionally difficult. It is called a stretch target, and aware of that. And the work that's going on to mitigate that, some of those strands of work are already having a benefit. So we've already seen a reduction in the forecast for this year due to negotiated joint care package arrangements with the ICB. That's just under $500,000. And between July and November, work gone on with officers looking at contract management and the care packages themselves has reduced costs of over $500,000. So there is possibilities in there of reaching that stretch target, recognizing that demand is going to be something that we can't predict with any great accuracy. So
if I can just follow that up through you, Chair, I think when we originally started putting the budget together, clearly there was uncertainty about the government funding back in the summer, and looking at the then picture of pressures within children education and families, this was a target that was introduced as we were trying to balance the budget arrangements, and has remained within the proposals. However, one thing that I would recognise, and has been seen in the integrated financial monitoring reports, that's been to this committee, and the IFMR that's been strategy, resources and performance committee, is we have seen fluctuations in demand, and whilst demand is not the single driver in terms of some of the pressures, actually the level of complexity and the cost associated with the high needs cases within children in care has seen the base budget projection climb higher than the 25-26. So you'll see within the papers that there is a pressure figure, along as alongside next year's forecast demand that is already exceeded in this financial year. So all things being equal, if we then started on the 1st of April with the additional children from this year, plus the demand that is forecast, we would see an overspend on day one. So I think that we are in a situation that whilst the work needs to continue in terms of both the efficiency of the service, but also the effectiveness and the outcome of the children and young people, I would recognise that that stretch target has become a risk since this budget was proposed. And if there are options to address it, then that would be one of the ways to de-risk the delivery of the 26-27 budget.
And Chair, if I may, and the implication for those children and young people being unregistered in unregistered homes, and the legal implication of that, not least the moral implication of what we should be doing for the children in our care.
Was that a question or was it? No, I didn't think so.
Thank you very much. Councillor Goldsack.
Thank you. There's a number of questions I could ask. Some have been covered by colleagues. The one that's outstanding to me is if I look at the bottom of page 94, was the target support and children's social care. The budget for this area is about 60 million, 61,639. Nearly 50% of that is being spent on home to school transport. That's an alarming spend for a whole area of delivery. Are we confident we've got our delivery models right? And are we looking at any innovative new ways of doing this to bring that figure down? That has to be a target area for us to reduce.
Yes, indeed. Martin, would you like to outline it?
Yeah, I think we're all agreed on that. There is a lot of intensive work going on multiple strands, looking at our delivery and our procurement and our contract arrangements across home to school transport, going from individual route management down to individual taxi routes, across all how we procure those different contracts and how we control them and keep them under review. So yes, there's a lot of work going on to look at that.
Thank you for that, Martin. If I can just come back on one point then. I think there should be, and it sounds like there is, an awful lot of focus on what we believe the need to be. What focus have we got on preventing the need and doing more about it in terms of, we've heard discussion about the new schools, we've heard about discussion in reducing the demand, because though if the demand was localised and more and people didn't have to travel so far, then it wouldn't be 1 million. So that's the question that I've really got. I give full benefit to the fact that we've got focus on the post event. I want to stop them happening.
I agree, and I think that the greatest area of growth has been in special educational needs transport. We're not focusing on that alone. Just want to reassure you that whether it's mainstream or special educational needs, we are working tirelessly to try and reduce those costs. But the biggest area of growth has been special educational needs transport, and the delays in the two special schools has added to the pressure for us as a county council. If we had those additional spaces, that would be potentially 270 children that would not be having to use school transport, or would be having a shorter journey for their school transport, or a different transport arrangement. If they're all going to the same space, it might not be individual taxis, there could be multi-child transport. So yeah, we are grateful that the Department of Education has moved and given us this new option, which is under consideration, as we've already heard. I won't go over that again, but our school place planning team are also working with transport to look at how we deliver additional spaces when we deliver them, and that they would cross-reference with our transport needs.
Lastly, Chair, through you, I think what might be good, and it may even be okay to have this after budget, what might be good is if we could have some form of strategy overview as to how we're attacking this area and what our areas of focus are. I think a strategy overview in this area would be really useful for all members going forward.
I do agree. I'm going to ask Sarah to come up and just say a word.
Thank you, Martin. We have a Travel to Learn plan scheduled for March committee. And within that plan, the 3 key areas of focus are looking at our contractual arrangements. So to see where we can be more efficient in terms of driving down spend, but also, as you've said, looking at the demand. And we're already starting to see improvements in terms of that contractual spend. And we've been able to make efficiencies by reviewing the numbers of solo routes, but also working with the CPCA where we're seeing that there's underutilized established routes where we've been able to reduce the numbers of routes and make a saving and still provide that transport. But I suppose what's critical to the savings is that we want to support independent travel training, and as you've said, progress the smaller schools strategy so that we are enabled to support more children to attend school in their local mainstream school.
I think that sounds great, and that I look forward to seeing that. That will be good. And you say it's at the March meeting. Yeah. So what I think I'm asking for, slightly over and above that, is a medium to longer term view on the strategies that we're following to get this. Is it there will be 6 new schools, 3 new schools, 5? There will be this change in modes of transportation. We've looked at bus. We looked at this. Did you see what I mean? Just knitting it all together, really, as opposed to what we're dealing with. And this budget's very comprehensive. What we're dealing is piece after piece after piece. I'd like to just step back, see the holistic view of exactly what our strategy is to, well, fundamentally deliver a better service to these children. That's the first thing, right? But in doing so, save this council and the council residents significant funding.
Yeah. So I think what you're articulating is that there is a definite overlap between our provision of places and meeting that need more locally, but also looking at how we can be more efficient when children do meet the criteria set out within the policy that makes them eligible for home to school transport. So to ensure that we do have that strategic join up, we are currently doing our SEND sufficiency statement. So what that looks at is, as we've said in previous reports, we're seeing a decline in mainstream, so children that attend mainstream schools, we've seen a decline in birth rate. However, for SEND, obviously, we're seeing an increase. So in terms of how we then respond to meet that demand, there's implications for how we reconfigure the school estate. So that's a combination of looking at some of the things I talked about earlier in terms of the Section 106 yield to support the development of more SEND provision within our mainstream school sites and the programme around our enhanced resource provision. But it's also working with our schools, because we have a large number of schools that have smaller schools, and so how do we work with those schools so that they can potentially look at federation amalgamation where appropriate, so that children, they remain viable, remain in that local community, and children then can still access those schools and don't have to travel long distances.
For last point, all right, and everything you say, Sarah, I totally agree with. What I'm saying is, right, now capture that, put that in a strategic view so that we as members can think, that's related to that strategy and that's where they're going with that. This is related to this one, that's where it's going with that. Because I don't feel, I'm trying to be as active and supportive on this committee as I can be. I don't feel that I've got that view of what that means. So if you want to go wider, I think something like 50% of our overall budget is spent on transport. It just seems illogical to me. So what are we doing to address those needs and to stop that need in the first place? So I'll leave it there because I don't want to dominate the meeting. But thank you very much for your answers, Sarah, and look forward to the March meeting.
Thank you. It is absolutely fair that place planning and home to school transport do need to look together, and I'm sure that will become more apparent in the paper in March, and the paper in March is a start. So and I think we're all looking forward to that. Are there any other questions, comments, or suggested recommendations? Yes, Councillor Martin.
Thank you very much, Chair. More of a comment than a question. And maybe this is just me as a newbie. I was expecting to turn up today and for absolutely fleet officers to give us an overview on what's in front of us, but also to be given a presentation by yourself, Chair. You know, at the end of the day, this is a political budget. This is the administration's budget. This is your budget. I was expecting to come here today to be given a bit of an overview on what the politics are behind the budget, the decisions that you've had to make, you know, whether they're good or bad, or you know, the good, the bad, the ugly. Just something from you, so we know as a committee what you have done behind the scenes, what the administration is doing behind the scenes to fight for young people, to fight for better funding, or to talk about the decisions that you've made. You know, even just looking through the fees and charges, there is a political decision in whether to go for full cost recovery or not. But we haven't heard any of that today. All we've heard is from officers. So anyone looking at, you know, watching in from home will think this is an officer budget. It isn't an officer budget. It is a political budget by the administration. So I'm happy, Chair, you know, if you're able to give us an overview now, that would be really useful. But I was kind of expecting to come into this meeting and to have that overview from the political side on the decisions that you have made as chairman, you know, receiving a significant SRA to do so, to make these decisions and to put this forward.
Thank you. Well, the budget is an evolving process, so this is just a step in the road, and many of the principles have been discussed broadly and in detail in previous meetings. It should be no surprise to anyone that we are passionate about protecting the vulnerable, about putting children and in particular children with special educational needs and disabilities at the forefront of our thinking. We have a poverty commission, an anti-poverty strategy. These all play into our budget, but the budget is really incredibly constrained, and generally we are between a rock and a hard place. So we do not sit there thinking, how many more millions can we spend in this area? It is really about being as efficient as possible, being competent, planning carefully, and doing what we can for our priority areas. And I believe that this budget is a really excellent example of that. Could we spend more in different areas? We'd really like to, but we can't. So that's a sort of whistle stop tour, and there are many elements of the budget which are of detail, which are right for us to scrutinize. But you know, those are the comments I would offer now. But we have many opportunities to discuss the budget overall. Thank you. Are there any other points of debate? No. So could I please ask Martin for your view of what recommendations have been made by this committee? I have one.
I have two. Yeah, the issue is consider so the first one I captured was to consider the additional transitional funding for the Crisis and Resilience Fund.
Correct.
And captured Bryony's, which was just consideration of the cost-effective delivery of the holiday voucher scheme.
Thank you. Yes. So these are both points that we would want. Yes.
I just think also that there was clarity asked around the stretch target and whether that could be delivered and whether there was anything that could be done around that.
Thank you. So those are three recommendations that we would are being proposed for us to put forward to the Strategy and Resources Committee. Is everyone supportive of that, or do we need to vote specifically on item by item? Can we vote on them en bloc?
Claire, and I did this in the previous meeting as well, you know, our group will be bringing forward its own budget and looking at it. So I can't vote and support a budget that I'm not going to support in a couple of weeks' time. So whilst I can see there's an awful lot of good work going on and an awful lot of good stuff, as far as voting against A, B, or C at this moment in time, I will be voting against.
Thank you. So there's no advantage of taking them on, disadvantage of taking them on block. Right. Right. So we've been asked to scrutinise the proposals. We've been asked to recommend 3 changes to Strategy, Resources and Performance Committee and to receive the fees and charges schedule. So would those in favour of that please raise the hands now? Thank you. Those against? And those abstaining? Thank you.
So that's 8 for, 2 against and 4 abstentions. So the recommendations for Howie.
Thank you very much. So let's turn to item 10, please, the determined admissions arrangements for the 27-28 academic year. If you could introduce this, please, Sarah and Alison.
Thank you. It is recommended that the Children and Young People Committee determine the admission arrangements for all schools for which the Council, as the local authority, is the admission authority, and also approve the coordinated qualifying scheme for admissions to schools for the academic year 27-28, as published in the documents which are linked at section 7 of this report. Each academic year, Cambridgeshire County Council is responsible for setting out the qualifying scheme in relation to the transition of children to primary and secondary school in Cambridgeshire. This ensures there is coordination of the process and a fair and transparent system for the allocation of school places. Cambridgeshire County Council's admission authority for all community and voluntary aided schools in the county must determine the admission arrangements for these schools every year, and consultation is required where certain changes to the published admission number are proposed. So the consultation on the admission arrangements ran from the 13th of October to the 1st of December 25. And the particular changes consulted on for admission in 27-28 were to the published admission number for Friday Bridge Primary School, which was a reduction of their published admission number from 17 to 15. For Hardwick and Camborne Primary School, which is a reduction of their published admission number from 105 to 90. And then a change to the oversubscription criteria for Priory Park Junior School to place Priory Park Infant School children ahead of catchment area applications. There were no objections received during the consultation, and so it is recommended that these admission arrangements and qualifying scheme are approved.
Thank you very much. Questions? Councillor Damery-Holman.
Thank you, Chair. Just hopefully a very simple matter of clarification. So with regards to Priory Park, just my understanding is this change is going to make it easier for those who attend the primary school to then go on to the secondary school and they're not competing as heavily with others.
It's for the infant school to go into the junior school, so it's to secure a smooth transition for those pupils at the infant school. Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions or debate? No. Thank you very much. May we move to the vote on the recommendations? Yes. So the committee is asked to determine the admissions arrangements as set out in the documents. There are 2 points that we need to approve or not. So may I ask for those in favour, please raise your hand now.
That's unanimous. Thank you, Chair.
Unanimous. Thank you very much indeed. And now item 11 is Children, Young People Corporate Performance Report. So please can I ask Martin Purbrick to introduce this report.
I'm actually going to ask Liz Clark to introduce the report, so apologies, I should have picked that up earlier.
Good afternoon, thank you. And for those of you who I think I've met most people, but I am Liz Clark, one of the service directors within the Directorate for Children and Education and Families. The corporate performance report, which is within Move. Thank you.
Sorry, it's just your speaker, but if you could just move a bit closer, we can't quite hear you.
Is that better? Thank you, Councillor Edge. Appreciate it. So in terms of the corporate performance report, what has been presented today, and obviously this is for information and obviously for you to scrutinise and comment on, it doesn't have a decision attached to it. So the report that's been provided today is an update to the committee on the strategic key performance indicators for Q2, which is obviously July the 1st. It is not accurate on the front page of the cover report, not June, but July the 1st to September the 30th, 25. So I am aware there's been a lot of business and a lot of papers this afternoon, so I'm going to just comment on a couple of highlights that come from the cover report. Obviously that you have the full performance report attached, and we can take questions as needed. So in terms of the section in the cover report, obviously the framework and purpose of the strategic key performance indicators is provided, and that we have 19 key performance indicators altogether, and within the quarter that this report covers, 10 were updated. 6 were green, which you can see in terms of there is some detail kind of around those within the report, obviously the main one and the cover report. We do have 1 red indicator in that 10, which you may wish to hear more about, but the narrative is in 4.3 in the cover report, which is around EHCP assessments completed within a 20-week time frame. Of note to you is to say that 4 of the 10 that were updated showed improvement in that quarter, and those 4 were the number of children with a child protection plan, the proportion of children subject to a child protection plan for the second or subsequent time, a pupil attendance performance indicator, and the percentage of primary schools judged as good or outstanding with regards to the quality of education. So that's what I would draw attention to, but obviously if you have any particular questions, we'll take those.
Thank you very much indeed. Are there questions? I think Councillor Goldsack, you were first.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Liz. Thanks for waiting. It's been a long afternoon. Thank you. Yeah, 4.3. You probably guessed that's where I was going to come and have a chat about. I just don't feel that the strategy that we're taking to close the gap to 50%, which is the target that we wanted from the assessments, etc., you know, we've got more money in October, and I know that's being spent, and we're making gradual improvement. Some significant improvement seen in the November figures, but to actually attain where we want to go, I think it's a long step, and I just don't see that we've got the strategies in place to make the step change needed to get there, other than over a hell of a long time and the hope that the EHCP number applications drop. You welcome your comments on that, Liz. Really, I really want to see this improve, and I don't think we're seeing the improvement at the rate that it needs to improve, quite frankly.
Thank you. You might anticipate that I will defer to my colleague to answer that one for you. Thank you.
Thank you, Liz. So, yeah, in terms of the rates of EHCPs, and I think we've probably shared some of this information previously, typically month on month we get 150 requests for an education, health and care plan. And the statutory requirement is that that is completed within 20 weeks. We know our current performance is way below what it should be, but what we can illustrate within the last few months is a significant increase. It's still way below the national figure of 46%, but our last month was at 30%, and we are expecting to have a cumulative figure next year of 20%. So we will be iteratively moving towards that national figure. Obviously, our aspiration is that we exceed that national figure. But I can tell you that in comparison to January to May 2025, when we were completing on average issuing 38 plans within 20 weeks, from June to December 2025, we are issuing 75 plans. So there is a significant increase. Obviously, in terms of that's on a month-by-month basis, as you've pointed out. But if we've got a backlog of plans, then it takes a while for that to impact on that cumulative figure over the year. And we need to balance between obviously prioritising those children that are in that current backlog with the new plans coming through. So we want to obviously have a risk assessed approach to addressing those backlogged plans.
If I can, Chair. I applaud the increase in performance. I know that the officers involved in this area are working their backsides off. I've got no doubt about that. But if you've got 150 on average a month coming in, and we're pleased with an increase to 77, that's only going to grow. We're not going to cut away at the baseline. And I keep reiterating, this is about the third or fourth time I've done this in this committee or on spokes. This is a child's life, a family environment, a school that's picking up the necessary short-term funding of a TA to support that child while they need extra help, etc., etc., etc. So again, the wheel's spinning on here, and we're making some progress. But I would really think that we've got to make a step change in the way that we're doing things, either with staffing or ability, or I don't know. I don't know what the answer is. I'm not an expert in this area. But I am right in saying if you've got 150 coming in and 77 a month is the new target going out, we're going to have to deliver 300 a month to get out, to cut that number down significantly over the months and years ahead, aren't we?
So I think your point is well made, but what I'm describing is I think we do have a step change in terms of part of this is about our practice and looking at where the delays are within that 20-week process. And that has led us to improve how quickly we can get through those cases. But you're right to say, obviously, it's also dependent on capacity. And when we had the report presented to committee in October, we were pleased to have 780,000 above budget to enable us to increase our capacity. Obviously, to enable us to recruit to that, we have done so within a redesign across education and SEND, so that where we can look at that more preventative approach, so look at some of our officers, some of the indicators that Liz has referred to. If you take attendance, for instance, you will see a disproportionate amount of children with SEND with lower attendance. So it makes total sense for us to look at the capacity across the wider education service to bring together those services to increase capacity. So we're in the process of, we have redesigned the service, and obviously now we have to go to formal consultation in terms of implementation, which would then, following that consultation, enable us to recruit to posts where we are seeing that capacity is most acute. So to build in additional posts in those areas, but it takes time to go through a fair and equitable consultation process, and it has to be a process that extends also to working with our schools and settings.
If there's a step change, and I really hope there is, I really wish you every success with it. But if that step change is there, when do we expect to minimally hit the 46% target? And further than that, when do we expect to get into the positive, which will be, let's say, 70% target, of which still 30% wouldn't be getting the service that they are entitled to?
So we're expecting to hit 20% for 26-27 as a cumulative figure, and the following year we're hoping to then increase further to be in line with that national figure. Obviously, there's a number of interdependencies attached to that. Critical to it is obviously the white paper that we're still expecting. But that is the aspiration that we have. And that is, as you've said, dependent on a change in practice, but also increasing capacity in those posts where we need it most.
Just to be clear about that, so for the year that we're now about to enter, 26-27, we think that we can attain 20%.
That is our target, yes.
Well, the national target is 46, which still means 54% aren't getting their turns on. Am I the only one scratching my head here? I'm not having a go at you, Sarah. I really am not. I'm just looking at this as a service and saying, like, and we're happy with this. We're accepting this. This is where we just had a budget discussion. This is where we should be looking to support these officers with significantly greater input to allow them to attain a much greater. The knock-on costs to this council and to our communities of not achieving this is huge. Achieve this, and those costs come down.
Could I just make one further point, Councillor Goldsack, because I think your point's really well made. I think coming back to that step change, what we're seeing is that dependency on the plan. What the step change is about meeting need that is not dependent on a plan. So the approach that we're adopting in the way that I've described, bringing additional capacity from other functions across the education, is to work with those families preventatively and to meet needs. So they may be still waiting for that plan, and absolutely we need to improve our performance, and we're illustrating that we are. But whilst they're waiting for that plan, it's critically important that we do provide support, and that is what I'm describing as that step change, where we move away from a process-driven approach to a needs-led approach.
Thank you. Councillor Demery-Holman.
Thank you, Chair. I just had a couple of questions on a few of the indicators. I think starting with, bear with me, starting with indicator number 2 and percentage of those in care. We've seen, and staying in being looked after for more than 2.5 years, sorry, we seem to have had a decrease over the last year. I appreciate that in the path to green that you state that, I'll quote it, recruiting in-house foster carers and building relationships with providers for effective commissioning arrangements progressing well, but it is too early to show this in the performance data. Have we got any idea of when we might start to see an uptick on this particular indicator? That's my first one. I don't know if you want me to just rattle through all of my questions. Yeah. Then I jump to indicator number 9, which is the percentage of 2-year-olds taking up the 15-hour entitlement for disadvantaged families. Again, we typically have been below our target, but we seem to have hit a dip in recent times. A lot of the path to green is talking about targeted works being reviewed and rolled out. Again, this is something that I'd like to see improved, but I'm also wondering, I think this is more of a statement, but as we progress in the cosmic side of things to the low-income family tracker coming forth, there perhaps could be an opportunity for collaboration between the departments there that I'd very much welcome. Happy to discuss outside of this. Only got 2 more, sorry. Number 13 is our reading, writing and math skills in Key Stage 2. We're below the national mean on this. We continue to be, and we seem to be declining at the moment. Given the reputation of Cambridge and Cambridgeshire, I find this quite troubling. You know, I mean, regardless of where we are, this is concerning that we're not hitting the national mean. But I would really welcome some thoughts on how we can improve there. Again, thinking to the service area and vice chair for, can we do anything for our library services to promote support? And that's particularly in reading and writing. And then the final one, Key Stage 4 attainment is dipping. We've now gone below target. I mean, this is more of a personal one for me. I'm interested in what we can do to support attainment here, particularly so as someone who works in schools, often we can see those who aren't going to attain. You know, it's quite clear with students when they're in Key Stage 4 whether they have that interest and ability to hit their the fundamental grades. They're all numbered now rather than lettered, which always confuses me. But is there anything more we can be doing to find an alternate educational provision for these children? I think back to when I've been out speaking and seeing what colleagues in youth work are doing and alternate education provision there. I was actually chatting with Councillor Dieter earlier about apprenticeships for people from 14, etc. You know, I think what I'm suggesting and sort of inquiring about is, can we be doing more to support those children who mainstream education isn't particularly for them, be it special needs or other reasons? And can we do more to support other vocational, perhaps, attainment? Thank you. I'm sorry for the long list.
I'm going to point to Liz and to Sarah to pick up
Point to Liz
both
and
of
Sarah.
those.
So I've got apologies, numbers 2, 9, 13 and 14 in terms of questions. So 9, 13 and 14, obviously ostensibly Sarah may wish to come in and comment. I was going to make the observation these are annually updated. So this is the same set of information that has come on a previous quarter performance report. As I sort of outlined at the start, not all of them have an update for every committee, and I appreciate that. So what I would then say in terms of, and allow Sarah to speak, is that there's considerable things that are happening alongside this that obviously the data will take some time to kind of catch up on. So do you want to do that and then I'll do 2?
Thanks, Liz. Thank you, Liz. The two that I will pick up. So one you mentioned was the take up of the targeted 2-year-old offer. And actually, although this has been highlighted as a red in the report, in 2024, it was the first time that Cambridgeshire actually exceeded national in terms of the take up of the 2-year-old offer. And what we've seen is and we are actually, in terms of our statistical neighbours comparisons, we've moved from 9 out of 11 to 4th out of 11. And so although it is highlighted as a red, it's red nationally, because what has happened is that through the expanded childcare offer, children who are eligible for the targeted 2-year-old offer are being pushed out. So this is because, and I think you'll see it referenced in the earlier budget report, the hourly rate associated with the 2-year-old offer is quite low. So for providers to deliver that targeted 2-year-old offer, if they've got the opportunity to have a higher rate coming from the increase in the 3- and 4-year-old offer, they're going to choose that. So what we've done in terms of increasing the take-up is we've looked at the data analysis and where that take-up is lower. So we know in March and Charteris, they're areas where we've had a targeted campaign, but also we've looked at how we promote the offer. And what we've tended to do is focus on how you access that offer rather than the value of it. So what we know is that by accessing quality provision in early years, you can transform outcomes for our most vulnerable children. So we've also revised how we support and promote the targeted 2-year-old offer. So hopefully that describes, although it is identified as a red, we are actually looking positive in that area and we're continuing to progress. So I think the other area that you mentioned is our Key Stage 2 performance. I can update on that. So I think within the report, it's captured as around about 57%. That at the point of publishing this report, the data was not validated. It's currently 58.9%, which I know is still below national. But when we look at that data by district, 3 of our districts are above national, but it's in Huntington and Fenland where we're still seeing underperformance. And that figure is obviously a combination of reading, writing and maths. And it's actually the writing that continues to be a challenge for us. So we have got a priority action fund initiative targeted specifically at improving performance in writing. And then I think finally you mentioned the Attainment 8. I think our attainment, I'm working from a laptop that's died. So so I'm drawing from my brain here. So our Attainment 8 performance is in 2021, that performance was based on teacher assessments, because obviously during COVID, that's how we had to report. So now this is obviously now externally assessed. We are above national for Attainment 8, but obviously our aspiration is to improve further. Some of the ways that we're aiming to do that is the way that Attainment 8 works is that different subjects are weighted. So English and maths, for instance, are double weighted. So what we need to look at is the curriculum offer across our schools to ensure that there are pathways that lend themselves to individual young people's performance. So hopefully that responds to the areas, Liz, that I think were specific to education.
Thank you very much indeed.
You want me to come back in on indicator 2, which was your other?
If there are new points that you would like to add, yes.
Only simply, I think, to make a couple of points. One is that at the last committee, we obviously brought the corporate parenting performance report, and one of the sort of more detailed pieces in there is around stability and placement stability. That's coming back to April committee. I'm going to say that with some certainty. So the next one is in April. So just I think about some of the more narrative and detail than is in this report is contained in that. So I think that was to provide that, and also just simply to say that we recognise that the stability is slightly below the target. It has dipped slightly. I think this is a lot more about the assurance that we want to give, and we can give more detail when we talk about the corporate parenting performance report. But we do analyse stability, we do have management oversight, we do placement stability kind of sort of meetings, we look at breakdown, we look at disruption, we look at themes, we look at patterns between, within our performance practice and learning board, which is a monthly board. It's one of the areas that is kind of scrutinised kind of through the areas of the service. So I think that whilst that's a very sort of stark kind of sort of one there, and I can pick this up in more detail when we come in April, but I think it's given that assurance around that we do know what's happening to our children, what's working well, and where we've got themes and patterns of challenge.
Thank you very much. Just to say, we've got 5 more people wanting to speak. Councillor Manning.
Thanks, Chair. We had a bit of an attempt earlier to do a bit of politics, didn't we? But I think this is not a political area, is it? EHCPs. I agree with Councillor Goldsack. We shouldn't be accepting those sort of figures. We shouldn't be sitting here like it's a standard normal thing, and I think the officers probably know that as well. What I wanted to ask about is how you're supported in terms of systems you've got to track this stuff. I mean, I had a bit of a look around. I always said I wouldn't do my professional stuff in the council, but I seem to be doing it this time around. I had a look and I struggled to find anything about systems to support EHP provision, IT systems. I mean, I found a paper on the DFE website from 2004 that was basically talking about, oh, maybe we should come up with sort of some sort of system to track this. So how are you tracking it, or how are you dealing with it? Is it all just spreadsheets and email? Is there anything specialised to support you?
So we are currently moving to a new system, which is called the EYES system, Early Years and Education System, which will sit in Liquid Logic. The benefits to this is that we will be able to then cross-reference children that have special educational needs to children that are also open to social care. So we're in the process of that implementation, which we aim to have completed by June. We also have a data subgroup to our Inclusion for All board that brings together colleagues from policy and insight, from SEND and also finance, so that we can look at, following conversations earlier, not only at the performance for children, so the lived experience for children with SEND, including our 20-week statutory timelines, but also the associated costs. So one of our aspirations is obviously to reduce that 540 children that are accessing high cost independent provision where appropriate through our development of the special school places and our enhanced resource provision. So we need a tool that will enable us to twin track placing children in alternative provision. By alternative provision, I mean either in local mainstream or in the ERBs or in our special schools, whilst also tracking the financial impact of that. So it's a developing feast, but I think that we are getting better in terms of our data accuracy, but we know that we've got more work to do, and we have been challenged by the chair and vice chair of this committee, and we have got a dedicated session coming up to explore the work of that data subgroup.
Yeah, I was about to ask that very thing. I mean, just very brief follow up on a very simple level. When you apply for an EHCP, how do you do it? Is there a system you go to, or do you just email someone, or
Yeah,
if you have
so-
very brief answers, fine.
Yeah, so you can email directly. So there's and referrals can come from either parents or carers or from schools. But we are also looking to trial through artificial intelligence an education, health and care plan that will expedite that process also.
Now you've made me nervous.
Be tried and tested.
Thank you very much. Councillor Martin.
Thank you very much, Chair. Just before Christmas, I went on a visit to a school in Huntingdonshire, one of our primary/junior academies, and they raised something with me that I hadn't considered before, and I think would be quite useful for us to track. And it's the reviews of EHCPs once they've been put in place. Yeah, we spend a lot of time talking about new EHCPs that are going in, but one of the requirements we have is that we have to review them within 52 weeks of them being put in place, and they should be reviewed every year after that point. And they raised with me about the number of delays that they've had to those reviews as well, including one. I've got a couple here that are over a year, so 69 weeks overdue. So that's 69 on top of the 52 weeks. There's one that's 187 weeks overdue, and the worst one is 262 weeks overdue. So it's been 6 years since it was last reviewed. So a very, very long time. This is a huge concern and something that it's never crossed me before. I've never had anybody raise it with me before, but it'd be useful to find out what the data is on if there are any delays and what the delays are. What's the average wait for the reviews? So I wonder if we can incorporate that in the corporate performance report in the future, so we can keep an eye on that, because I hope that these are anomalies, especially the 262-week one, but it'd be useful for us to have an oversight on that, so we can see if any additional resource needs to go into that service area.
Firstly, on that 262 weeks one, I would like you to share the details, please. But in terms of annual reviews, we have had a significant improvement. As you've said, there has been significant delays that are not acceptable. But what we have been able to do is move some business support capacity from elsewhere in the directorate to support SEND. And we have now seen an improvement of 780 annual reviews that were previously backlogged. So we can ensure that that is built into that data dashboard that I referred to earlier. But if you could please send me the details of those significant delays, because they are quite concerning.
Thank you very much. And just to note that the request has been made more than once that we add to the metrics that we have in our corporate performance report, which does give more of an indication of what's happening overall, and all the different weights, not just the 20 weeks, which is helpful if they're done in. It's important they're done within that time, but that we are aware of how many are going beyond that date and just the scale of it. So we're waiting for the officers to come forward with a proposal for other metrics that we can look at, which inform us more helpfully. Councillor Edge.
Thank you. We've got quite a few things, but I'm going to try and keep it as short as possible, and I'm not expecting a response on everything. You can come back with it at a later date. Just very quickly, there's I don't think it was mentioned earlier, but there's a slight error in the summary suggesting that Q2 was from the 1st of June. It was actually from the 1st of July. I don't know whether you picked that up earlier, but we need to make sure that that's kind of clear. It's right further in the paper. So one thing I just want to kind of point out, and this, please feel free to review this and come back at a later date. But on the sat on the highways this morning, and obviously we've looked at a similar paper. And one of the things I noted by comparison was that they have both a direct, they kind of report back on their directorate risk register and their current change management projects. They lay that out just to give kind of a broader overview of the overall performance of the directorate. I think it would be great if we could look at potentially adding that to the pretext of this report in the future. I think obviously we've heard a lot on from Councillor Goldsack on item on number 5 on the EHCPs, and we know that the data has moved on since that. I think being a slightly newer member and kind of being quite used to kind of looking at business performance and kind of seeing the timeliness of that, I think what I saw this morning and this afternoon actually slightly concerns me, that we're getting data back. We're sat now in Q4 and we're scrutinizing data that kind of goes up to the end of Q2, and I think in that time, in that kind of in between times, context has changed significantly, and I appreciate you can report back on that in the commentary, but it would really be good to be seeing that data being more up to date. I know that's a bigger I know that's a bigger question, and I know we need to kind of get that data across the piece kind of worked on so that we can have that. But I really do think that we need to be seeing things as as closely as possible to what that what that performance actually is. I'll stop there because I think a lot of the other things have been covered.
Thank you very much. Councillor Stewart.
Good afternoon. I welcome the direction of travel and clear improvement over the last year, and I am reassured by the 3-year recovery plan and the way in which you're making progress with the EHCPs. As an educator, I understand the system and how it works quite well. I'm just trying to work out, though, is the current backlog mainly due to psychologist capacity, caseworker capacity, or business support processes? If you could just answer that first, and then I'll come back to you.
I would say it's a combination of all 3 factors. Nationally, there is an issue in terms of educational psychologists, and they obviously we require them to do the assessments, but we've also identified that throughout that 20-week process there's other backlogs which are down to the efficiency of business support, and that's why we're currently doing a business support review. So it is a combination of all of those factors, and also I think the reference to the system. So yes, I would say it's a combination of all those factors, and that's what's informing our redesign.
Thank you. In terms of going through the reports and diagnosing a child, I think maybe referring the children to staff within school would, I think, reduce the numbers. Obviously, I'm speaking more abstractly at the moment. I know that the white paper in terms of Department for Education linked to SEND, it will be published at some point in the summer, I think. There's a focus in terms of equity first within the education system, so that we focus on supporting children from the outset, and hopefully that can reduce the backlog, so that educators within the school system can reduce the need for EHCPs. And I think with that focus, I think the numbers will eventually begin to come down, because I think as an educator and members of the CYP, we are concerned that we're not meeting the national figure. But I think maybe the Cambridgeshire Council could be the driving force nationally in devolving, so to speak, the allocation of EHCPs to schools themselves, and having more on-site psychologists. I know that most schools, they do have members of staff that deal with students' mental health and well-being, and I think maybe if there was an MPQ qualification, that could sort of link directly to that rather than to the SEN coordinator aspect, it could help nationally. And I think I would love to be part of a council that led the way in something like that. So maybe you could possibly explore.
Thank you very much for your comments, and I feel that what you've set out there reflects what we are expecting in terms of the white paper that's been delayed. I suppose the one thing I would say is that parents are a key part of this. So, you know, although obviously I'm describing a step change that reflects what you're saying, where we're looking at needs-led rather than a dependency on a plan, obviously a lot of parents want and need that plan to access the support for their child. So it's a careful balance, isn't it, between obviously working with our parents and carers to ensure that, you know, if the plan is perceived to be the way that they get that support, we need to bring them with us and build their confidence that if things do change, it won't mean that they don't get the support.
Thank you very much. Councillor Goodliff.
Thank you. I'll keep it brief. I'm looking at number 16, the choice of secondary school. In the very small print, it says 249 children in total were allocated schools outside of their expressed first, second and third preferences. I know there's a particular issue with some children who end up being allocated a school that is way away from where they live. I know in north of Cambridge City, there is a huge issue. Last year, we had a need for 1,024 spaces with a PAN in the local schools of 960. And I know that this year the figures are for 1,072 children, again with a PAN of 960. Can you tell us in that context of North Cambridge, what work you're doing in order to make sure those children can go to their local school, and if any schools, you don't have to name them, are admitting over PAN, but also whether there are other areas in the county where children often end up having to have transport or use local transport to go to schools that are way away from where they live. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Goodliff. I'm going to have to take that away. I'm sorry, unless I can invite Alison out to the table who has access to the data. I'm so sorry because I think 'cause I've done so many reports, my laptop's run out of juice. So, but I will take that information away and ensure that we do provide you with detail around that.
Is that acceptable, Councillor Goodliff? Thank you. Unless anyone has any other comments to make or questions, thank you. That we've just been asked to note that, scrutinise and note, so no vote is required. May I move on to the final item today on today's agenda, which is the committee agenda plan, training plan and appointments. So Tamar, is there any further updates to the agenda plan, please?
Just one small update. At the spokes meeting, it was discussed about making sure that we had the ASEN action plan reports at the correct intervals on the agenda plan. So that's been updated. So I think you've got that on, sorry, the so on the next. So what you've got it on the April committee, and then it's then June, and then it follows on. So I think we were missing a couple of points, so that's just been updated, and that's it.
Thank you very much. Are there any comments on the committee training plan? Councillor Goldsack.
I apologise, I put my hand up earlier. It's not on the training plan, it's actually on the forward agenda plan.
Yes. Would you like to?
Okay, you called it a training plan. I thought I'd zoned out for a minute, but okay, apologies. I think as a collective sharing, officers and members, that the one key area within CYP's remit that requires a real focus is the HCP. I think we've had a really good debate about it, and you know the officers are working hard, but I think there's a lot grounds for improvement. There's no single agenda item to cover EHCP. It's only really covered as part of the performance report. I'd like to think that at some point, quarterly or whatever, until we're there, I have mentioned this before, that we have some EHCP focused dialogue and report and debate, so that we can let me be very blunt about it, so that we can go away and fight for better resource and better both physical and financial resources into this space, if that's what you tell us you need. But we're, you know, I just think there's a little bit of a miss here.
Yeah, the area, the ASET, it's not very clear. It doesn't, because it's not called EHCP, but the Area Send Action Plan quarterly update report will cover that, and it's on a quarterly basis. It's the quarterly report, so you'll get a lot of detail in there as well as data. Yeah, and we will bring intermittent reports also to spokes as well. So there is.
Can I just come in on that as well? Because I think one of the issues here that I think we're all kind of, I mean, it shouldn't be any surprise, but we're all waiting for this white paper. We don't know when it's going to come. It's, you know, it's already a year late, and we don't have any certainty when it is definitely coming. It should be arriving any day, but is it really going to? We just don't know that. And although I think officers are working on the Ascend bit of work, which we will get updates on, I think that's, I mean, kind of going back to your point, so that is the fundamental thing that we desperately need in order to be able to come up with a really truly strategic solution that kind of tackles a lot of these things, because you know, we, in the meantime, we can be more efficient, but until we've got that that white paper, you know, we could invent something that we need to change the next day, and I think that's what we've all been waiting for so long. So I think that might be part of the problem there with the HCPs as well.
Thank you. Are there any other comments on the training plan? No. Thank you very much. You'll note that there's still 2 vacancies outstanding, one on the Culture Steering Group and one on SACA. So I don't know if there are any nominations for either of those today. If not, please, can we consider how we get further nominations for those posts. But with that, may I say thank you very much indeed to everyone. That's the end of today's business. Thank you for a really constructive and full debate, and we meet next on the 10th of March. Thank you very much.